Table stands with Michael Schumacher 5 points clear of Damon Hill. Schumacher the winner in Brazil, Spain and the last round in Monaco. Hill victorious in Argentina and San Marino. No other drivers have won races this season, but the Ferraris are threatening. But in qualifying, Schumacher has been dominant, his third pole position in succession, and remember, he won this Canadian Grand Prix from pole position last year. Damon Hill alongside him on the front row, Coulthard and Berger on row 2, Johnny Herbert there on row 3, and once again 5 British drivers in the top 10. But as we go live now to Montreal, the important element this morning has become the weather. Very wet at the circuit Gilles Villeneuve today, and we see one stranded McLaren as well. In position to tell us a lot more, Jonathan Palmer and Murray Walker.
Well spotted, Steve. The stranded McLaren, unfortunately, was that of Mark Blundell, who spun on his way to the grid and is, even as I speak to you, legging it as fast as he possibly can back to the garage to get into the spare car, which is being prepared for him. Now, you've heard about the weather problem. There is Mark Blundell going out in the spare car. You've heard about the weather problem. We had 2 glorious sunlit hot days for qualifying on Friday and Saturday, during which Michael Schumacher took pole position. Damon Hill was just about 4/10 of a second slower, with Coulthard a magnificent third ahead of the 2 Ferraris of Berger and Alesi and Johnny Herbert's Benetton. So 2 Benettons, 2 Williams and 2 Ferraris in the top 6. But this morning, when we got up and looked out of the windows, the rain was lashing down. For the 30-minute warm-up, the conditions were awful, particularly for David Coulthard and Damon Hill, who were respectively 12th and 16th fastest, failing to get any traction at all. Jean Alesi, looking absolutely superb in a very steady Ferrari, was fastest, with Rubens Barrichello, the Jordan Peugeot driver, only 2/5 of a second, Berger third. So the Ferrari team have been praying for rain during the race, which it looks as though they are not going to get. Michael Schumacher was 4th, taking things fairly easy. Mika Häkkinen in the McLaren was 5th. And then the 2 Saubers, Sauber Fords of Heinz-Harald Frentzen and his new teammate Jean-Christophe Bouillon, were an excellent 6th and 7th, with, as I said, Coulthard 12th and 16th. Now, the Williams team must feel very happy at the present moment, because the rain stopped, the skies started to lighten, and the track, as you can see, is virtually dry. Those dark grey patches are still damp, the lighter patches are dry around this 2.7-mile island circuit, because we're on the Ile Notre Dame, which is a man-made island for the Expo of 1967 in the mighty St. Lawrence River. And if it dries out, it will be a good thing for Williams, a bad thing for Ferrari. But the emphasis is on the word if, because as I look out of the commentary box window now, upwards, the sky is very, very black and threatening. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we have rain during the day, during the race. And I know we say this every time there's a Grand Prix. You're looking at world champion Michael Schumacher now. But the crucial question is strategies. But before we talk about that, Tony Jardine is with Damon Hill on the grid.
Damon, mixed weather and mixed fortunes for you in the warm-up this morning. Is the car okay now?
I couldn't really tell. I mean, the lap we go out of the garage and take onto the grid gave me a good feeling. The car felt quite nice, but then it didn't go that quickly, and the track is half and half at the moment. It's half wet, half dry, but it's drying very quickly.
Obviously, you can't tell us about your tank today, but do you think you can have a good go at Michael?
I think so. We made some progress with the car. I think we changed the car, and I think we've gone in the right direction. And we haven't shown this weekend that we're able to beat him, but hopefully that will change in the race.
Thanks, Damon, and good luck.
Well, it's a long race, 69 laps. It's going to take 1 hour and 3/4. I was just about to introduce the strategies. You're looking at the magnificent skyline of Montreal City now. But the question is it going to be 1 stop? Is it going to be 2 stops? I can hardly see it being more than 2 stops. Maybe just 1. What do you think, Jonathan Palmer?
Well, it's hard to say, as ever, and the plans that the teams have made, they generally keep to themselves. But there we can, looking overhead there at Montreal, but the question that the teams have been working out, as ever, is to see how much time they can save by running the car lighter and offset that against the time they'd lose with the extra fuel stops. Now, the race here, as with most Grand Prix, it's 200 miles long. This circuit is particularly heavy on fuel. It's a little bit like Imola. It's a medium speed circuit. We have a great deal of second gear chicanes interspaced with reasonably long straights, and that means it's a power circuit too, and that contributes to the fact that we've got the Renault engine Benetton of Schumacher on pole, and then behind Schumacher we've got Hill, Coulthard, Berger and Alesi, the two Ferraris making particularly good use of their horsepower advantage here. But it's going to be, I must say, between 1 or 2. I don't think it'll be any more on that, but we're going to have to watch the pace of the leading cars in the first 20 laps to see what they're going to do.
David Coulthard in the second Williams, only 12th fastest this morning, third on the grid. Tony Jardine.
A great performance in practice, 5th to 3rd, but with these mixed weather conditions now, David, do you think that can go in your favour?
Well, I certainly think now it's drying up, that's more in our favour, because in the wet warm-up this morning we had a big handling problem, so now it's dry. I think that suits Damon and I a lot better, and now we just need to hope for a clean start.
Just how bad was it in the wet?
Atrocious. You know, we just can't explain how bad it was. We were 12th and I think 16th.
Drivers have all been complaining about the bumps and about this controversial chicane. What's your view?
The bumps are a problem, but only on the straight. And I think now we don't really need the chicane there. All we need is a straight down into this last chicane. So I think for next year it'll be changed.
Thank you very much, David.
Let me remind you about the World Championship. Michael Schumacher after 5 races, and incidentally, you're looking now at the car of Mika Häkkinen from the top of his roll bar, which enables you to see the driver at work, particularly that very big steering wheel that Mika Häkkinen uses. And this is an indication of exactly, in this recorded form, what this Montreal track looks like from the driver's point of view. The Gilles Villeneuve circuit, named after the great Canadian driver who won here the first time the race was held in Canada. That's the chicane, about which there has been a great deal of controversy. You will notice that there are cones on the right and the left, and there's actually been a ruling that nobody is going to be allowed to pass during this race after they have got to the first cone. They're extremely unlikely to be doing that anyway, because by the time you've got to the first cone, you are very much committed to the corner. But there has been a lot of criticism about the authorities for not doing a more permanent job. The chicane is exactly the same as it was last year. Now, I was saying, Michael Schumacher that you're looking at, or were looking at now, this is a recording of him going into the Senna curve, which is the first turn on the circuit, with the St. Lawrence River on the left. And the pattern that we've seen from qualifying, it really is for Michael Schumacher once again to dominate the form, just ahead of the Williams duo, very evenly matched between Coulthard and Hill, with Ferrari being the third of the top 3 teams. Michael Schumacher, his teammate Johnny Herbert, done well. He's 6th on the grid. What does he think about things, Tony?
Yeah, Johnny, 6th on the grid. It's not a bad position to be in, but it's a race of attrition. How are you going to play it?
Well, we really have to see what the weather does. We sort of hear it's going to be okay, but you never know in this place. But it's just really getting off the line fine, getting in a nice slotting in behind maybe for one of the Ferraris, hopefully get one of them, and just really watching the race and seeing how we go from then on.
Dire conditions this morning and some damage for you to the rear of the car. Everything okay?
Yeah, no, it was fine. It was just the wing. There's a couple of corners that are quite sort of difficult. Even in the dry, they slide around, and it just sort of caught me out. But I'm aware of that one now.
Have a good race, Johnny.
Thanks.
Well, it's been a good, solid performance from Johnny Herbert here in Montreal. For the last 2 Grand Prix at Monaco and Spain, he qualified in 7th place, and he's now moved up, one of the few drivers to really show some progress. And his 6th place here really was an excellent effort. He was in fact quicker than Damon Hill in the second qualifying session, and his time was just 7/10 of a second away from Michael Schumacher in yesterday's generally slower qualifying session on the Saturday. And there is Schumacher. Schumacher has continued to dominate. He was very quick on the first day when he set his fastest time of the 1 minute 27.6. Damon Hill has really been disconcerted this weekend. He started off going pretty well with second place with his 28.0 on the first day of qualifying, but then pushed very hard by David Coulthard, who got within 500ths of a second on yesterday's qualifying session when Hill was trying a few experimental setups, whilst Gerhard Berger, he's been pretty outstanding this weekend because he's driven well when he's had frustrations from mechanical problems. He lost his engine in the first session, but he's been consistently quicker than Jean Alesi, and Alesi really has frustrated the team, I think, a little here. He's been a little bit rattled. He hasn't been as calm and collected as he has been of late, and he has been probably 3 or 4 tenths of a second away from Gerhard Berger throughout the weekend.
Mika Häkkinen is 7th on the grid. That's Ron Dennis on the right. And the McLaren Mercedes is definitely going a bit better here than it has at recent races. Eddie Irvine, 8th on the grid. He's had a lot of problems, including having a fuel pump drive break in the first lap or so of the warm-up this morning. But nevertheless, he has again out-qualified his more experienced but younger Formula One teammate Rubens Barrichello in the second Jordan. Martin Brundle is in 10th position on the grid. Mark Blundell, I'm sorry, is in 10th position on the grid in the McLaren Mercedes. And then Olivier Parnis, who is Martin Brundle's teammate. Martin is actually the lowest of the British drivers. There's 6 of them in this race. He's 14th in the Ligier. Now, to get back to this world champion point I was trying to make, there's 5 points difference between Michael Schumacher in the lead with 3 victories from 5 races, Damon Hill, who is second, with 2 victories from 5 races. So it really is terribly important, not only from the point of view of the Drivers' Championship, but from the point of view of Damon Hill's psychology and mental well-being, for him to do well here at Canada today. The 2 Ferraris, 3rd and 4th, the 2 Ferrari drivers, Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi. Now, the seconds, the minutes indeed, are ticking away. There's about 7 minutes to go to the start of the race. The teams are going to leave the tyre choice until the very last moment, by which I mean, are they going to start on slicks with no treads or wet weather tyres with very heavy treads? The wet weather tyres don't last nearly as long. Tony Jardine, you're on the grid. What's your view?
It's very difficult, obviously, with all the tyre covers on at the moment, Murray, but I do know that Berger and Schumacher came onto the grid on wet weather tyres, and I haven't actually seen them change them. They're under the covers. Then both the Peugeot cars, the engine cars of the Jordan team, they came into the pits, and they definitely changed onto slicks into the pit lane before coming back onto the grid. Just quick news update. Mark Blundell obviously won't speak to us. He's a little bit upset at the moment, but he thinks it got stuck in gear and locked up and spun him off the circuit.
Well, as far as you can tell from the outside, that's what it looks like. Damon Hill saying, as we all are, what's the weather going to do? It could be, as we've just heard from Tony Jardine, that if the Ferraris are starting on wet tyres from positions 4 and 5 on the grid, it will have been an inspired decision. It will have been an inspired decision if it starts to rain, and it really is one way or the other at the moment. And as ever in any Grand Prix, it's terribly important to get pole position. David Coulthard, third on the grid. It's his second drive at Canada, and Schumacher has actually got that pole position. So he's in a commanding point on the grid for when the race starts. 69 laps, long time. If he can get ahead, it's going to be a lot easier for him to stay ahead. And when they start, it's a very short dash down to the second gear left-hander, which leads into the very tight second gear 40-mile-an-hour Senna corner, just by the Victoria Bridge, which goes right across the St. Lawrence. And then they're accelerating hard and building up to a maximum speed of about 170 miles an hour before they come to the east hairpin. which is the slowest corner on the track. It's a second gear 35-mile-an-hour corner. Then they're back up to very nearly 170 miles an hour before the right-left flick, which leads into the start and finish straight past the garages. Now, Montreal is very cold in the winter. It's very hot in the summer, and the result is that the track is very, very bumpy indeed because of the way that the tarmac lifts in the summer and then cracks in the winter with the cold. It's very difficult to do anything about it. It's like the Mexican circuit used to be, for totally different reasons. The Mexican circuit was built in a volcanic area. But it's bumpy here. It's very, very hard on fuel consumption, very tough on fuel consumption, which is one of the reasons that Ferrari were hoping for a wet race with their V12 engine, because that has a beneficial effect on their fuel consumption if the race is run at a slower speed. So it's bumpy, it's hard on fuel, it's a long race, 1 3/4 hours. The circuit itself is not particularly difficult to drive on. It's narrow. It's a bit like a street circuit without the houses, to use the immortal phrase coined by Martin Brundle some years ago, because it is a natural road and this track is only used once a year. Damon Hill, second on the grid, focusing his concentration and his thought on getting into that first corner first, in front of Michael Schumacher in pole position. There he is, a car's length, which could make all the difference, in front of Damon Hill.
And what's going to be particularly difficult for all of these drivers here is that none of them have driven this weekend in these kind of conditions. They've driven in the pouring rain this morning on wet tyres when the lap times are around about a 2 minutes figure. They've driven in the dry when the lap time was about a 1 minute 30. So about 30 seconds a lap slower for going from completely dry to completely wet. Now, it's my guess that, in fact, all of the cars are on slick tyres. The track looks reasonably dry. It's completely dry in places in front of our box. Probably 25% of it's completely dry, and the remainder is damp. But with no standing water, I'd be surprised if anyone's going to start on wet tyres, because a wet tyre on a dry track is a lot slower than a slick tyre. Maybe some 8 seconds, 5 to 8 seconds slower than a slick tyre. So it's very important that that mistake is not made. And of course the weather conditions are at the moment drying. It is not raining anymore, and indeed if it started to rain now there would be a start delayed board so that the teams would have a chance to change tyres. In fact, we're just getting some of the tyre warming covers coming off, so we may get a chance to see soon. But with the temperature of the tyres needing to be built up and the dampness in the track making that difficult, we're going to see a pretty fraught first 2 or 3 laps, I would think, as the drivers learn about the level of grip they get. And also you can see there around, that's turn 2, the dry line on the inside, the wet on the outside. And when the cars jostle for position over the first lap or two, it's going to make a big difference to them whether or not they're on one of the drier lines or whether they're being pushed out onto one of the outside. And I'm sure there'll be a few casualties here. We've had quite a fraught day yesterday in qualifying with a number of spins. Rubens Barrichello having a very big accident from which he emerged completely unscathed. The team doing a remarkable job rebuilding his Jordan in just 1.5 hours. Now we're going to get an idea. There we are. There are the slick tyres. Those are the untreaded dry tyres. It was Ferrari that we gathered went onto the grid on wet, so they have changed. I think it's highly likely that everybody now is going to be on dry tyres.
2 previous winners in this race, Gerhard Berger, who won that very memorable Canadian Grand Prix in 1992 when he took victory, and the other one, of course, is Michael Schumacher, who won last year. So there is the view from Gerhard Berger's roll bar. To his left on the grid is David Coulthard, just slightly ahead of him. Berger 4th on the grid. You can see the rip-offs on his visor, that bit of plastic sticking out to the left of his helmet as you look at it enables him to catch hold of the rip-off and pull it away. There'll be another one underneath it. The grid is being cleared, and now a formation lap.
So the final lap to warm up brakes, warm up tyres, and this time for the drivers to find out just how much grip there is. Coming down into turn 1, the left-hander, second gear at 50 miles an hour, down to one of the slowest corners there, turn 2, that's just 40 miles an hour in second gear. Good overhead view of that as they then punch out using all the 700 horsepower up to 4th gear and 150 miles an hour before the next right-left. They're just going to be coming into that corner as they go out of our picture to the left. There we can see Eddie Irvine there, weaving, warming up his tyres, And there's a brand new set of tyres on the front of, look like Frenson Sauber there. Now this was where Barrichello had his big accident. This is turn 5, a blind right-hander flat out in 4th gear at 150 miles an hour, down to one of these many second gear chicanes. This is second gear at about 60 miles an hour, and then round the right. That is indeed there. That's Frenson with brand new tyres. Now that's not a clever thing to do, because one normally needs to have tyres that have had the newness taken off to get grip, and that's also with Olivier Panis behind. See the white labels, that's the telltale sign. Now coming out of the, this is into the second of the, or rather the third of the second gear right lefts, and these are all around about 60 or 70 miles an hour. Now it's important for Panis there, and we saw telltale signs of that from him, to weave the car from side to side to get temperature up into those tyres and scrub off the outer aspect of it. Now that's the hairpin that they're going around. They're coming around the left-hander up towards this new chicane. This was introduced last year. That's Johnny Herbert there with a new front left on his car, and coming into this new chicane that was introduced, and it's at this chicane that now Schumacher has been through it. We haven't actually seen it at this point. Schumacher slowing right up. He's really got a long way ahead there. And as Damon Hill and David Coulthard close up behind that is, there we are, Schumacher really getting some heat into those tyres now. These tyres needing to be up at that 90 degrees to get the most grip out of them, and they're probably going to be something like 70 degrees at the end of this lap, with still quite a lot of grip yet to find, and it's going to be tricky for this first lap or two, there's no doubt about it.
Now, as they come up to the starting line, the ones to watch, of course, are Michael Schumacher, who is in pole position on the left of the grid. That'll be on the right as you look at it. Damon Hill, who is in second position on the grid. Now, there you can see Schumacher on the right, Damon Hill is on the left, then behind him is David Coulthard, then the two Ferraris of Gerhard Berger in 4th position and Alesi in 5th position. And look at the way, incidentally, Berger's got his Ferrari angled already to try and sprint between Hill and Schumacher at the start. And when I tell you that Coulthard, Berger and Alesi are in the same grid positions as they were at Monaco 2 weeks ago, and remember what happened there on the run-up to Saint-Devote, keep your eyes peeled for this first corner there. This is it coming up. Schumacher gets away well, better than Hill. Coulthard is alongside his teammate. Coulthard is challenging as they go to the left-hander, but it is Schumacher, Hill, Coulthard, then the two Ferraris. Johnny Herbert is inside one of the Ferraris. It was Jean Alesi's, and here we come. Schumacher leads, clear track in front of him. Then the two Williams, then the two Ferraris. Johnny Herbert, Mika Häkkinen is in 7th place. The two Jordans of Irvine and Rubens Barrichello, they're the two 40s, the yellow cars, which are 8 seconds a lap at least slower than the men at the front. So Pedro Diniz will be lapped very, very soon indeed, maybe as early as the 7th or 8th lap. This is coming down towards the east hairpin for the first time. No change in the first 5 so far. It's Berger in front of Alesi. Schumacher leads, and already a gap is developing between the Benetton Renault, and incidentally, Schumacher started from the 100th pole position for the Renault concern with their V10 engine. And there's a chance. Oh, that's Johnny Herbert, and he's been hit by, it looks like, Mika Häkkinen. It's certainly one of the McLarens. And Herbert has not stalled his engine, and it is Mika Häkkinen who's had to take a $10,000 fine for ignoring a yellow flag in practice. It was a suspended fine from the previous Grand Prix, and now are they going to have to stop the race? Because you can see they are stuck on the course, and Häkkinen can do nothing about it. Johnny Herbert, I think, has stalled his engine, and they are right on the racing line, and it looks as though for the second time in succession a Grand Prix is going to have to be stopped. And it's not going to take us very long to find out, because the leaders, with Schumacher already 2.5 seconds ahead of Damon Hill, the red flag is ready. Here's a replay.
So let's have a look. Häkkinen comes up the inside, Herbert comes across to close the door on there, and Häkkinen there noses into the side of Herbert. Häkkinen looked to me as if he was going to have a good chance of going up the inside of Herbert. I'm surprised that Herbert didn't actually leave him room, bearing in mind that was the situation. And you can see now that Then we have the safety cars there coming out, and it looks like the cars are going to be out of the way, but it looks like Häkkinen's car is jammed in gear, and this is one of the problems that we see quite often now with the semi-automatic gearboxes, that the cars can often not be moved. And this means now that that's Häkkinen there being taken out of the way, and that's David Coulthard.
David Coulthard out, so there are two of the top men out. I don't know what happened to Coulthard because we didn't see it any more than you did, but that means to say that it's already here's a replay. Now they're coming underneath the bridge on the approach to the east hairpin. The Ferrari goes through on the left, and Coulthard just lost it. Coulthard just lost it, probably on a damp patch, into the gravel trap. And it looked to me in the process as though Alesi passed Berger and up into now third position. But the race is continuing, it's not being stopped.
So let's look at Coulthard now, coming down to the hairpin. He brakes, and simply what happened, I'm sure, is that with the slippery conditions we've got, we said that those tyres weren't up to temperature. We know from this morning's warm-up session that the Williams is tricky when it's wet. Now it's not wet, but it is damp, and I'm sure that all those factors have led David Coulthard there to lose control of his Williams. Fundamentally a mistake from David Coulthard, and you can see it on his face. He is absolutely distraught, and no great surprise there. Second lap, a driving error, just braking a little bit too late, the back of the car locking up and spinning it round. So I'm sure no mechanical problem there. One could see also just how very slippery and tricky it was as we saw Alesi try to have a go there successfully up the inside of Gerhard Berger. Alesi there ahead, Berger with the camera on top, the waved yellow flags there. This is the chicane, the right-left chicane, where Coulthard there has gone off there into that corner, and just shows you how very tricky these conditions are.
Lap 3, and already it's the old story. Michael Schumacher is almost 3 seconds on lap 3 ahead of Damon Hill, with Alesi having moved up into third position ahead of Berger. Barrichello is 5th in the Jordan Peugeot. His teammate Eddie Irvine is 6th. Now, we're riding with the Ferrari now. There the two of them are together. Alesi in front of Gerhard Berger, and I'm looking at lap times. Damon Hill is faster than the Ferraris, obviously, but it looks to me as though they are closing. And if there's one man who wants to win this race, of course, as he always does, it's Sean Alesi. Not only because he's in a Ferrari, not only because there are rumours that his position in the Ferrari team is being threatened, with talk of Michael Schumacher going to the team next year, but also because it's Jean's 31st birthday today, and he's carrying the number 27, which is the number of the great Gilles Villeneuve when he won for Ferrari in Canada. A terrific incentive, and Alesi is now the fastest man on the track. He's just gone round 7/10 of a second faster than Michael Schumacher, so he's starting to gain on the Benetton. But before he can get to grips with Schumacher, he's got to catch and pass Damon Hill, and look how hard he's trying.
Absolutely, and look at that car control from Jean Alesi. These are conditions in which Alesi really thrives, and I'm sure that we've still got that McLaren down on the midway through the hairpin there. Let's have a look as they come down, whether they've been able to move it or not. Alesi really loves these kind of conditions. You know, it looks like they have moved it, but Johnny Herbert's Benetton is also out. Alesi loves conditions in which grip levels are less than optimum, and that can mean damp like this. His ability to read the track, to understand just how much grip he's got, and to exploit it to the limit, when particularly in these conditions it's changing lap by lap. This track is getting faster, and the ability to know just how much harder to push, how much later to brake without losing control, and we saw Alesi right on the brink of that, is a rare gift. And Alesi with Schumacher, with Senna, these drivers tend to have it more than any of the others.
Alesi 5.3 seconds behind Michael Schumacher, but inching up on Damon Hill. Race order, lap 5 out of 69. Schumacher is now over 4 seconds ahead of Hill. Alesi 3rd, Berger 4th, Barrichello 5th, Irvine is in 6th place. Martin Brundle is 9th for Ligier. Mark Blundell in the spare McLaren is in 11th place. Johnny Herbert, of course, out of the race, as is Mika Häkkinen, and they're both out as a result of that first lap collision. Rotten luck for Johnny Herbert, who was really showing signs of getting to grips with the Benetton.
Yes, indeed, that really was dreadful for him. It seemed, again, Alesi is right on the limit. He's pushing so hard. And, you know, there are a few drivers who've got the confidence in their car to push that hard, and I think he is making a little bit of ground up there on Damon Hill. He took 1 second off him the lap before, and then in fact the last lap he took 0.6 of a second off. But I think Häkkinen there was just being too impetuous, a fault that he's had from time to time. Track conditions were difficult. The chances of that kind of manoeuvre coming off were certainly limited at best, and to take 2 cars out effectively on the first lap really was not good driving, when one knows, and Häkkinen in fact was telling me just before this race an hour and a half ago, how it's so important to be there at the end, because this race does historically have a high attrition rate. Well, he's been the first one to contribute to that here, and with the casualty really I think being Johnny Herbert.
There is Eddie Irvine. He's in 6th position. Ahead of him is his Jordan Peugeot teammate Rubens Barrichello. Behind him is the Sauber Ford of Heinz-Harald Frentzen, and behind him is Olivier Panis. Now, the Jordans have had bad luck in the 2 days running up to the race, but they seem to be in good shape now. They have a new rear suspension. They have literally exactly the same Peugeot engines here in Canada as they had in Monaco 2 weeks ago. There's a new evolution of it coming along for the French Grand Prix, Peugeot's home ground, in 3 weeks' time. But the good news for Jordan, if they can stay there, as you watch Michael Schumacher leading, is that the Jordans are 5th and 6th, just ahead of the Sauber of Frentzen. 8th is Panis, 9th is Brundle, 10th is Mika Salo, and Michael Schumacher is leading by 4.8 seconds, and his last lap was 7/10 of a second faster than Damon Hill, second in the Williams Renault. So it really does look as though Michael Schumacher, the driver of this year and last year with Damon Hill, has got the race by the throat. The car is reliable, the engine goes extremely well, Schumacher is fit, and he's on a terrific psychological high after his success this season. But look back as he completes this lap. This will be going into his 7th lap. Now there is Damon Hill behind him, and I do believe he's getting closer. 1.3 seconds behind him was Alesi. There he is. Behind him is Michael Schumacher, and the gap is just a bit closer between Alesi and Hill.
Yes, I think things could improve a bit for Damon Hill now, because the track can't be far off a pure dry condition, maybe 1 second at most. And I think as the track gets drier, that situation will play into Damon Hill's hands better. He prefers it to be dry, without doubt, whereas Alesi, we're riding with Gerhard Berger at the moment, whereas Alesi prefers it because he knows he's better when the conditions are damp and slippery. Now, at the moment, Schumacher has done just what he did last year. He led from the line, he pulled out 5 seconds more or less in the first 5 laps. He stopped just once at lap 40 of this 69-lap race, as did Damon Hill. Damon Hill stopped once last year, and Jean Alesi too. But Gerhard Berger, he stopped twice, and the Jordan cars stopped twice. But looking at what's happening this year, we've got Barrichello already 12 seconds behind Gerhard Berger, Barrichello in 5th, and there into the pits there, that is Montermini coming in one of the Pacific cars. This is too early for any kind of tyre stop. This is a problem, I'm sure, for the Pacific team. Now back with Damon Hill, and it looks like Alesi's closed up on this lap, and with Berger close behind. Now what we don't know at the moment is how much fuel they're running, and as ever this is an important factor, and we will only know when we get to round about lap 25, because if they haven't stopped by then, the chances are they're going to be going for one stop later on, round about lap 35.
Well, the Ferraris are certainly pushing Damon Hill very hard indeed, but meantime, Michael Schumacher is taking advantage of this situation, and the fact that he's got a drying, clear track in front of him. He's just gone faster than anybody else, because his lap 6 time was 1 minute 30.483. He's the first person to get into the 130s. Damon Hill's lapping in about just over 131, as are the Ferraris. So Michael Schumacher again is in a class of his own. The others will be hoping that the tyre strategies could help them. Is Schumacher coming in for 1 stop or 2 compared with them? But in the past that's been a forlorn hope, because so very often, certainly a lot of people think at Monaco, the tyre strategy, the refuelling strategy of Benetton was superior to anybody else's. Incidentally, Williams strongly deny that their strategy was wrong as far as Damon Hill was concerned. 2 stops compared with Schumacher's 1, because Hill actually had a differential problem, which was giving him oversteer, slowing him on the corners and making him drop back from Schumacher. However, We'll wait now to see what happens. We're on lap 8 out of 69 as you look at Taki Inoue, the Japanese driver in the Arrow's Heart. He's in 18th position and he's lapping some 4 seconds slower than the leaders. Schumacher is 6.3 seconds ahead of Hill now on lap 8. Alesi is right up tight behind the Williams. Berger is still in 4th position. Barrichello is 5th. Irvine, his teammate, is 6th. So Benetton, Williams, 2 Ferraris, 2 Jordan Peugeots.
Now let's hope this time that there have been no jump starts, because it was around about at this point, lap 7, lap 8, that we learnt of the first of those 7 jump starts that were announced at the last Grand Prix in Monaco as a consequence of the new jump start electronics being introduced, and we learnt that in fact all of those jump starts did indeed occur, and the drivers have got to get used to the more sensitive, more accurate system that we now have. And there, as we say it, there we are, Katayama. Well, there he was about that time, and I'm sure that that is again a consequence. Now the drivers have really got to learn that they cannot move at all before that light goes green, and Katayama the first casualty. Let's hope the only one. Now, Tony Jardine is talking to Johnny Herbert, now down in the pits.
Johnny, terribly bad luck for you. Tell us your version of events.
Well, it was, you know, I got a good start, was happy where I was, and then Mika just tried to overtake from what I think was a silly position, you know, that early in the race, and where he tried to do it and how late he was trying to pass me. It was just very silly. You know, you have to be, you know, side by side to do it, but he just edged himself in right at the last minute, and it was just too late for you know, me to do anything about it. It was just, I just think, very silly.
Looked very frustrating as well, because you seem to have locked horns. The front of the cars were locked together.
Well, it didn't help things. It didn't feel too... it didn't want to go anywhere at that point. So, you know, there wasn't very much. The steering felt a little bit damaged anyway. So I probably wouldn't have continued very well anyway.
What were track conditions like?
Well, they're not a problem. You know, we looked obviously when we do our installation laps before the start, and the circuit was basically had a dry line everywhere. It was damper in certain places, but you know, it was slicks anyway.
Thank you for talking to us, Johnny, and hard luck.
Already on lap 10, there is only 1 car and 1 driver in the Canadian Grand Prix as far as victory is concerned. He's got 59 laps to go, admittedly, and at least 1 tyre and fuel stop. But it's Michael Schumacher, head and shoulders in his Benetton Renault, in front of the rest. Damon Hill still battling with the 2 Ferraris, as into the pit lane comes Bertrand Gachot, 17th position in the Pacific Ford. They'd hopefully overcome the gearbox problems which have been afflicting them up to this, the 6th race of the year. But there is a problem. This is not a tyre and refuelling stop, as you can see. But now Jean Alesi really is with Damon Hill.
And here's the real battle, of course, between Hill, Alesi and Berger there. Berger with that silver lump on top of the rollover bar. That's that onboard camera that we get such superb views from time to time. Now, the Ferraris are about 5 miles an hour faster in a straight line with their V12 engines than the Williams cars are with their Renault V10s. I must emphasise that that is not necessarily a difference of horsepower, although I think the Ferrari V12 does have more power than the Williams, because the amount of wing these cars are running, that's how much downforce also affects this. And the Ferraris, I think, are running less wing, they're running smaller wings, and although it doesn't look so, we can have a little bit of a look from those head-on shots, and the less downforce these cars run, the faster they will tend to be in the straights. Now, having said that, although the Ferrari is a little faster in a straight line, it's still probably not going to be enough to enable Alesi to overtake, even if he gets a bit closer, which he needs to be yet to Damon Hill. And he may well have to wait until the first round of pit stops, whenever that may be, particularly if it's a 2-stop strategy. And if it's a 2-stop strategy, we can expect to see the first stop being round about between lap 20 and lap 25, and the second stop round about lap 45 to 50. And that's Luca Badoa there coming in one of the Minardi cars, and looks like, yes, this for him, of course, but that's for one of his stop penalties, of course, the time penalty, and is Martini, of course, for his time penalty there, I beg your pardon.
And behind him, Ukyo Katayama, so they're literally having to queue up to take their 10-second penalties. They've both done so. It looks as though there are just the 2 penalties in this race, because far more had been declared in Monaco 2 weeks ago, as a result, as Jonathan was saying, of this new checking equipment that's been installed. Now, here is the danger for all of them, because the man that they are catching is Pedro Diniz, in the yellow 40. He's 19th. He's already been lapped by the leaders, and his car is so much slower than the others, some 8 seconds a lap. I was forecasting he was going to be lapped on lap 8. That was if the conditions were wet. Well, he wasn't. He was actually lapped on lap 10, but it means to say that once again he's going to be at least 6 or 7 laps behind everybody else when the race finishes, if he finishes, and he usually does. Gerhard Berger that we are watching, 4th position. Now the gap between Hill and Alesi there and Berger there is 8/10 of a second between Hill and Alesi, 9/10 of a second between Berger and Alesi, although you can see visually what the gap is. Now they are on the top part of the circuit near the St Lawrence. They're coming down very shortly round the hairpin. They're at it now. That's the slowest point on the corner. Now they're coming up to the chicane, which they go through in 2nd gear, and you can see those ridiculous plastic cones sitting there, hardly the wear for a Formula One racetrack. But there is Alesi, there is Berger, and it looks as though the Ferraris are not now making any impression on Damon Hill, because they're in the area where turbulence from his rear wing is going to make it very, very difficult for them to pull out and get past. Michael Schumacher, lap 13 out of 69, leading the Williams and Ferrari battle by 8.1 seconds.
And that gap has increased over the last 3 laps by 1.5 seconds, so Schumacher pulling out relentlessly, half a second a lap, and yet his style is so smooth, so fluid, and really Benetton have got their act together very well indeed now. Schumacher has regained, I think, the confidence and the form that he had last year. I think it really did go off a bit in the first part of this year. I think he got rattled by the fact that the Benetton was not going as well as he would have liked earlier on. We had that spate of accidents involving Schumacher, the most dramatic being in Imola when he spun off, when he was on slick tyres coming out of the pits in damp conditions. And that looks like Salo coming in for his time penalty there, and the drivers must all come in within 4 laps of being signalled to do so, otherwise they will receive the black flag and be eliminated from the race. And that's what happened to Montermini in the Pacific last time. So 10 seconds goes, and this whole penalty will probably cost them about 30 seconds in total. So it really is a major blow, and it's going to put them well back in the field.
Lap 13, there's the leader, Michael Schumacher, 8 seconds in this 69-lap race ahead of a battle for second between Damon Hill and the Williams. The 2 Ferraris of Alesi and Berger. Alesi right under the rear wing now of Damon Hill's Williams. Rubens Barrichello, and Hill is coming up to lap Roberto Moreno in the second 40, who is in 18th position. And again, this is always a problem when you've got cars close to each other. Well, Roberto's an extremely experienced driver. He's been driving in all categories of single-seater motorsport for a very long time. He knows better than to get in anybody's way, and he didn't do so with Hill and Alesi. Berger is now past him and will doubtless close on Jean Alesi. Rubens Barrichello is still 5th. Eddie Irvine is still 6th. Princeton driving well in the Sauber Ford is in 7th place. Olivier Panis is 8th. His teammate Martin Brundle is in 9th position. 10 is Gianni Morbidelli in the Arrows Heart. And in 11th place, Mark Blundell in the McLaren Mercedes. Retirements. Johnny Herbert and Mika Hakkinen collided on lap 1. David Coulthard spun out of the race on the same lap. 3 of the top men out almost as soon as the race had begun. And we're riding now with the Ferrari, or were exiting the tight right-hander, the hairpin, into the chicane. Now Damon Hill can see the determined, forceful, mercurial Jean Alesi in his mirrors now. The Ferrari pushing. The car is handling better than any Ferrari has for a long time now. This is Damon Hill, and we're finishing the lap, coming up to turn 1.
Now just ahead of Damon Hill's steering wheel, we lost it there, but have a look next time we get one of the onboard shots from Damon Hill. He's got a couple of things of interest on the front of that Williams cockpit. One is the spike that sits, the blue spike that sits on the cockpit coaming just in front of his steering wheel. Now this spike has to be of a height that is just above the top of his steering wheel, and as the steering wheel on that Williams is D-shaped with a flat top to help his vision forward, when he's turning the wheel, of course, the lower part of the wheel comes up, and that's why that spike must be up there to cover that scenario. Now, in front of that, and for the first time on this race, he's got a camera that looks back at Damon's face, and that's the white blob that's about 6 inches in front of the back end of the cockpit.
Fingers crossed for the Jordan team, because they have only had 1 point-scoring finish, that of Eddie Irvine, who was 5th in Spain for 2 points in the first 5 Grand Prix of the year. Well, that's Rubens Barrichello, who's in 5th position. Behind him, some 3.7, nearly 4 seconds, is his teammate Eddie Irvine. But the important thing for Eddie Jordan, with the Peugeot Works engine and the fact that they're coming up to the French Grand Prix in 3 weeks' time, where obviously any French component or manufacturer wants to do well, is that both his cars finish at least in the top 6, hopefully in the top 3. But coming towards us in the chicane. So there is Barrichello 5th, behind him Eddie Irvine 6th, and 7th behind them it is still Heinz-Harald Frentzen. The gap is 4 seconds between 6th and 7th.
And in fact, that start that we saw was very good in general from the front end of the field. Nobody got involved in any wheel banging, nobody went off at the very first corner, but Rubens Barrichello did move ahead of his teammate Eddie Irvine. Irvine losing out because through this first corner, Irvine tried to go around the outside. He tried to take advantage at this point here. He tried to go around the outside and got on the damp part of the track, and that allowed Rubens Barrichello to move ahead. And Barrichello had qualified just 1 place behind Irvine from his qualifying session. Barrichello in 9th and Irvine in 8th. And Schumacher really has is pretty much under control, though he has lost half a second now to Damon Hill, and part of that I think may be coming from traffic, but the pace seems to have settled down now, around about 1 minute 30, 1 minute 31.
So you're the expert. Strategies. When are they going to start coming in? 69 lap race. Are they going to be making 1 or 2? And particularly Michael Schumacher.
Well, I think it's so dangerous to say these days, particularly when it involves a Benetton and a Williams, because so far the history of the season is that we have seen Benetton tend to make 1 stop less than Williams. And that would have us adopting a theory, if we extended that here, that Williams will stop twice and that Benetton will stop once. Now, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Schumacher doesn't seem to be pulling away quite as fast as I thought he might have done had they all been on the same routine. But as I said, I'm afraid we have to hedge our bets, and we have to just wait and see until the 1/3 distance point arrives. And quite simply, if they haven't stopped by 1/3 distance, or maybe 2 or 3 laps afterwards, then we have to assume they're only going to stop once. And that 3rd point is round about lap 23, lap 24. Another 8 laps before we know.
I'll tell you this, that last night the Williams team had worked out that the difference between a 1-stop tyres and fueling strategy and 2 would be 1 second over the distance of the race. That's how finely the margins are that they have to work to.
And here's the kind of time when Alesi will really hope that Hill's going to be stumbling over Katayama. That's Katayama in the Tyrrell ahead of him. Katayama having had that time penalty. And Alesi is indeed closer than ever. And he is having a look into that. This is where Coulthard went off. And he's going to be having a lot more looks too, because there isn't just Katayama ahead. Ahead of Katayama is Martini in the Minardi. So there's a bit of potential now for Alesi to get by.
Yes, and he's going for it now. He's going to try and go down the inside and force Damon Hill out of the... And he's done it! John Alesi moves up into 2nd place with a really forceful move. Now we're with Damon Hill. This is the end of the lap that they're coming up to now. There is the chicane, and Alesi will be trying desperately to put clear air between himself and the Williams. Now he's got a problem, because having passed Katayama, there is Pierluigi Martini in front of him, and behind Pierluigi Martini is Mika Salo. So Martini, Salo are about to be lapped, and behind them, 2nd, 3rd and 4th, Ferrari, Williams, Ferrari. Here's a replay.
Absolutely brilliant driving there from Jean Alesi. That might have looked relatively easy from where we were looking, but he would have been braking from 185 miles an hour right down through the gearbox, down to 2nd gear. Let's look at it from Damon Hill's side. Watch on your right side for Alesi to... There we are, a little flick to the left from Hill. He knew that the moment was lost. He's keeping on the power, he's keeping tight in case Alesi runs wide. But that was good driving from Alesi. He knew that the situation was developing in which Hill would lose his rhythm, and to an extent I think Damon did lose his rhythm. That's their Katayama just now holding up Gerhard Berger a little bit. But that will be a great source of frustration for Hill, because he's going to know it's going to be very hard to have an attempt to come back at Jean Alesi.
So head down, birthday boy Jean Alesi is going to be really going for it now. 10.6 seconds was the gap. The incentive on his 31st birthday is if he can close the gap between himself and Michael Schumacher, his first ever victory in a Grand Prix. And this is Alesi's 91st Grand Prix. It's long overdue for this very popular young man. So Martini now is holding up Hill, who is in front of Berger, who has passed Vicasalo and lapped him, and on lap 18 out of 69, Schumacher leads Alesi by 10.6 seconds as Berger looks at Hill. They've both got past Salo. Hill third, Berger fourth, Barrichello is fifth, 16 seconds behind Berger, and 2 seconds ahead of Eddie Irvine, who is sixth. Frentzen still seventh, Parnis is eighth. Damon Hill laps the Minardi. Now we're with Gerhard Berger going into the Senna corner, second gear, now accelerating up hard to the right-hander, which he approaches at 150 miles an hour.
And what's interesting is seeing how much trouble apparently, and that's Martini really giving Berger there the chop. It's interesting to see how much trouble that Berger and Hill are having getting by these back markers, but we mustn't forget that these two cars, and oh, that is bad, really. Martini should be letting him go now, but as far as Martini's concerned, he's been penalised with that time penalty, and this is the problem. Both Martini and Katayama there have had the time penalty, and so in fact their pace is quite a bit quicker than they would normally be at this point, than they'd normally be compared to back markers that Berger and Hill would tend to come upon at this part of the race.
Well, Gerhard Berger will be furious. The blue flag was being waved at him. Now he's going through and taking Pierluigi Martini and giving him the fist. But look how much further now Damon Hill is ahead of the Ferrari than he was when they both formed up behind Pierluigi Martini. Into the chicane, Martini is way down now. He's battling for 15th position with Mika Salo. Martini is 15th, Salo is in 16th place, and Damon Hill turns in to complete the lap. Berger there in 4th position. Barrichello is still 5th. The really exciting battle in this race is for 2nd, 3rd and 4th, because Schumacher, while all this has been going on, has extended his lead even further. He's soon going to be in a situation where he can come in, make a tyre and fuel stop and get out still in the lead, because he's 13 seconds, as near as makes very little difference, ahead of Jean Alesi. So my hope, and that hope of a lot of Ferrari enthusiasts, that Jean Alesi would be able to close the gap to the Benetton Renault in front, which was 10 seconds, has been temporarily dashed. But Alesi never ever gives up.
Not at all, but that was bad driving there from Martini. He did make the mistake by jumping the start in the first place, and that's what put him back. And indeed, he does have a reputation for either not looking in his mirrors or not heeding what he sees. Reflecting back to Imola, he was in pretty fine form then, holding up the Williams drivers, particularly in that race there. So he's going to come in, I'm sure, for some further criticism at the end of that race, because that obstruction did cost Gerhard Berger a couple of seconds.
Damon Hill down to the chicane. He's lapping now in 1 minute 36 compared with 1 minute 30.6 of Michael Schumacher, race leader there, who's just gone through to complete his 20 laps and go into his 21st. So I'm not going to say, as I have said before, it's all over Barber shouting this early in the race, because there are still 49 laps to go, and in Formula One anything can happen, and usually does. But it's certainly looking pretty rosy for Michael Schumacher for his 4th win of the year, having already won that contentious race in Brazil, where he was suspended because of an alleged fuel irregularity, only to get his place back again on appeal. But he won, and then he won in Spain, then he won in Monaco, and that gave him those 5 points lead over Damon Hill in the World Championship, which is very demoralising for the Englishman.
I think we had a glimpse of a Sauber. Yes, that is indeed a Sauber, and I think it might be Frenchland. It's no, it's Bouillon, we think. We think it's, there we are, Bouillon, and out of the race, I suspect there, I'm sure I'm going to back for Jean-Christophe Bouillon. A shame, because he was in superb form this morning in the wet warm-up session. In fact, he was 7th fastest, really underlining that Bouillon is, I'm sure, going to be a future talent when he has more time to settle in to his new home there at Sauber, and whilst he continues to get Formula One mileage, in fact testing with Williams, and he's one of the only drivers, in fact the only driver to be driving 2 Grand Prix cars at once, in that he's testing with the Williams and racing with Sauber, and that's a combination which really should make his learning curve pretty steep indeed.
Schumacher coming up to Salo, already to lap the Finnish driver in the Tyrrell Yamaha, and Salo is in 13th position. Taki Inoue has already been lapped, as has Pierluigi Martini and Katayama and Moreno and Gachot and Deniz and Montemini, and of course we've got the retirements. David Coulthard is out, and now into the pits comes the Tyrrell Yamaha, and the mechanics set to change the wheels, refuel. It takes about a second to put that nozzle in if you do it properly and cleanly, which the mechanic, he was obviously having trouble in doing, and a couple of seconds to get it out. So if you have a 10-second stop, that means effectively you're putting fuel in for 7 seconds. And an important development here is that the bore of the inner tube in the fuel delivery system has been changed, as a result of which it's going to take about another 2 seconds to pump in the fuel. The rate of delivery has gone down from 12 to 10 seconds, and David Coulthard, who retired earlier on, is with Tony Jardi.
David, I know you must be bitterly disappointed. Tell us what happened.
Well, I was having a little bit of difficulty under braking with the rear of the car, and then eventually, as you saw, the Ferraris were swarming all over me, and I just tried to leave it to the last at the second chicane, and I just lost it over a bump, and that was it, race over. So very disappointed.
Hard luck, David. Thank you.
Retirements from Johnny Herbert, Mika Hakkinen with their collision, David Coulthard, who you've just heard from as a result of losing the Williams on that bump and spinning out. Jean-Christophe Bouillon is out on lap 22, is the 4th retirement. There are still 22 cars circulating. Sorry, 20 cars circulating out of the 24 that started, because sadly there are no Simtex here. They announced at Monaco that if they couldn't get substantial extra sponsorship by the time of the Canadian Grand Prix, when the planes left to bring the cars here, they would have to withdraw, hopefully temporarily, but that is exactly what's happened. And this gallant little team, which certainly deserves the sponsorship, has had to not be in Canada. Hopefully they will be in France.
Well, that was a very frank opinion then from David Coulthard as to what his problem was, and certainly fitted in with what we thought. But Coulthard, I know from a driver's point of view, will be feeling the consequences, the effects of that huge disappointment for several days. It takes 3 or 4 days for a driver to get over the great depths of despair at something like that. But Coulthard is very mature, and in fact it's a good time to reflect back on his Monaco performance when he had gearbox problem, because what subsequently was revealed, as we look, that's that overhead view there from Gerhard Berger, what was subsequently revealed was that Coulthard actually had a throttle problem to start with. He had full throttle, but only over the first quarter of the travel of his throttle pedal, which effectively gave him an on-off switch for a throttle, and that meant that his gearbox had a much harder time because of the way that these semi-automatic transmissions worked. So for Coulthard to have run in 3rd place and looking really quite strong with an on-off throttle with 700 horsepower being switched on and off on a circuit like Monaco really was tremendously difficult, and I think he deserves great credit for making such a good job of it until the car let him down.
Jean Alesi pressing hard in the Ferrari. Well, the gap that was some 13 seconds has now been reduced to 11 as Schumacher and Alesi carve their way through traffic. Frankly, I don't think that's terribly meaningful, because it's the luck of the draw who you come across. For instance, there is Alesi catching Taki Inoue, the Japanese driver, very new to Formula One and finding it very, very difficult to master. He's in 14th place, he's been lapped already, and he's about to be lapped by the 2nd place man as they come down to the East hairpin. Look how much faster Jean Alesi is going than the Japanese newcomer.
And indeed, that was that straight line speed advantage. We spoke about it earlier, some 5 miles an hour that would have helped Alesi get by Damon Hill into that corner. Now it's lap 23, and this is round about 1/3 distance, so this is the time when we should start to expect any cars making 2 stops to be coming in. This lap and next, certainly in the next 3. And the other basic rule of thumb that we should consider is that the earlier a car comes in for fuel, the less impressive its performance has been. And therefore, if, as we saw in Spain, as we saw in Monaco, Schumacher is at the front and keeps going longer, that makes his performance all the more creditable. And it's my suspicion that Schumacher's going for one stop here. He did it last year, and he's not really pulling out very much over Jean Alesi in the race. He's just maintained an 11-second gap now for about the last 8 laps. And in qualifying form, Schumacher certainly had a second over Alesi. So I would interpret from this that Schumacher's going to stay out for one stop, and that's one of the Minardis there coming in. Schumacher will remain out on the track until lap 35 and make one stop, and we may see a Ferrari coming in now.
It's another 10-second penalty. There are the numbers counting down as we rejoin Damon Hill in 3rd position. But Berger has now pulled the bug out, and he's really close to Damon Hill as they come up behind the arrows. And this will give Gerhard Berger the opportunity to close up on the Williams. Now, is Damon Hill being delayed? Yes, indeed he is, because the arrows in front of him is on the racing line. Hill's going to go through on the inside of the hairpin. We're with Gerhard Berger, who does exactly the same thing. Lap 25, we should be having the first fuel and tyre stop soon, with Schumacher now 11 seconds ahead of Alesi, who is 3 seconds ahead of Hill, who is just ahead of Gerhard Berger. Bertrand Gachot in the Pacific comes into the pits for the 2nd time in the first 25 laps of this race, and this time it looks as though it really is for a tyre and fuel stop. Yes, it is.
Yes, he obviously had some kind of technical problem on the first time round. The Pacific has one of the smallest fuel tanks of the cars in Formula 1, and like the Tyrrell, doesn't quite have enough capacity in its tank to only make one stop in the race. It has to make 2 stops.
Look at this! Look at this! Gerhard Berger right up with Damon Hill as the Pacific team, and this is it! Berger's going through! He forces his way through, just as Jean Alesi did. Terrible news for Damon Hill, terrible news for Williams. I wonder if Hill's got some sort of a problem. Not necessarily, because the Ferrari really is handling superbly now. It's almost on a level, if not on the same level, as the Benetton in terms of handling performance. And the Ferraris are now 2nd and 3rd. Jean Alesi 2nd, Gerhard Berger 3rd, down to 4th from 3rd, having previously been 2nd, goes Damon Hill, and this is helping Ferrari, of course, in the Constructors' Championship. They're on 10 points now, and they are just 5 points behind the Benetton team at the present moment.
Well, it's been a bad race for Martini. He came in for his 3rd pit stop, and that was his, just then as we saw, but that was his 1st stop for tyres. The one that the Minardi that we saw before that was indeed Martini also, and I'm sure that he was brought in for a time penalty for holding up Gerhard Berger, and quite rightly so too. We really are seeing an increased level of discipline being exercised in Formula 1, and that has to be to its advantage. And well, the rules state, in fact, that if you come in for a time penalty of 10 seconds, you may not refuel and stop for tyres. Now, here is that manoeuvre there of Gerhard Berger. It seemed that Hill really got slow. He has a bit of a half-hearted effort at thinking about closing the door, but realises that it's a lost cause. Berger is through, and now moving up now to 3rd place.
What we don't know, Jonathan, is whether Damon Hill has got a problem in the cockpit. All sorts of things could have happened, potentially to affect his performance, that we wouldn't know about just looking at the car, and you've had plenty of experience of those.
Yes, I suspect that Damon has got something that he's not happy with, and that probably is the balance of the car. We've spoken before about balance. This is the all-important relationship between front grip and rear grip of the car, and they really have to match very accurately, otherwise the car can be difficult to drive. But I think we should also consider the strategy once again. We're now lap 26, and we've yet to see anybody but the Minardi and the Tyrrells coming in, so I would conclude at this point that we are seeing a straight race here between the front cars. Pit lane speeding there for Katayama. We have the speed traps in the pit lane now, and the speed limit is 120 kilometers per hour. That's 75 miles per hour. And in fact, there is not much excuse for exceeding it, because the cars, virtually all the cars anyway, have a button on the steering wheel that actually limits the engine. It's like a rev limiter. It's a speed limiter in effect, and so it's really very difficult, providing the driver pushes that button, for the speed limit to be exceeded. But it's my suspicion that these cars that at the front, that Schumacher, Alesi, Berger, Hill, Barrichello, Irvine, the top 6 indeed, are all intending just to make one stop by lap 27, so that's going to be in about another 7 laps time.
And meantime, as the Tyrrell Yamaha comes into the pits for fuel and tyres, Gerhard Berger is stretching, Michael Schumacher is stretching his lead. It's over 13 seconds now ahead of Jean Alesi. This young man really is a superlative driver. He's held up by, surprise, surprise, the Minardi as he goes to pass it, and he's coming down towards turn 8 now, which is a pretty quick one. Schumacher sweeps through on the inside, and it's Pierluigi Martini back on the track after having taken his 10-second penalty. Lap 28 in the Canadian Grand Prix, 69 lap races. Frentzen on the right retires. Heinz-Harald Frentzen retires the Sauber. That's on lap 28, and he is the 5th retirement. The cars are falling out of the race as Frentzen sadly climbs through the fence. Well, that's both the Saubers out, a great disappointment. Schumacher completing his 28th lap, and it really does look as though they're on a one-stop strategy. And on lap 28, Schumacher leads Alesi by some 13 seconds. Gerhard Berger third, so both the Ferraris are in the top 3 again. And if Gerhard Berger finishes in 3rd position here, it would be the 5th time in 6 races that he had done so this year. However, there's a long way to go. Damon Hill is 4th. The 2 Jordans are still 5th and 6th. Rubens Barrichello from Brazil, the youngest driver in the race. Eddie Irvine is 6th. Olivier Panis is 7th for Ligier. Another Ligier is 8th, that of Martin Brundle. Incidentally, it's been confirmed that Martin Brundle is going to drive the Ligier in France and at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix in 5 weeks' time. 9th is Morbidelli in the Arrows. 10th is Blundell in the only McLaren Mercedes after the retirement of Mika Hakkinen on the first lap when he and Johnny Herbert collided. Luca Badoer is in 11th place but has been lapped, and into the pits comes Ukyo Katayama, who is in 15th place for his penalty, which we don't see. But Alesi turns through the chicane. Schumacher's got a very comfortable cushion now. There's his signal, P1, 12.9 seconds ahead of Alesi. Berger is 3rd, and that will be a very comforting sight for the young German. 26 years old, comes from Kerpen near Cologne, and he's very much the hero of Germany these days, and understandably so. They've produced a truly great Grand Prix driver who shows every sign of adopting the mantle of the great Ayrton Senna. And Alesi turns round turn 2, now down through the series of right-left bends up to that notorious turn 5, which he's approaching now, doing about 150 miles an hour. This is where Barrichello went off yesterday, was out of the car quicker than anybody I've ever seen in my life because there was smoke coming out of it and he thought it was on fire, and you could hardly blame him for undoing his safety belts and removing his steering wheel and jumping out as quickly as he did. This is turn 8, which is approached at 170 miles an hour. Flick right, flick left, then still doing 170 on the approach to turn 10, the second gear, 35 mile an hour, east hairpin right-hander, where they start to run alongside the Olympic rowing strip, and they're there now, the Olympic rowing strip from previous years, into and out of the chicane, second gear, and this is Gerhard Berger, who is in 3rd place. There's Damon Hill 4th.
And whilst that's going on, we've got a very close battle going on that we haven't seen, and that's between Ligier teammates Olivier Panis in 7th place, who is just 1.5 seconds of Martin Brundle in the second Ligier, whilst 20 seconds behind that dueling duo, we've got Morbidelli in the Arrows car, who's just 1.5 seconds of Mark Blundell. So we'll have to watch that battle carefully, but it's now just 5 laps away, I'm sure, from the one fuel and tyre stop that the cars are going to have to make. And this is, in many ways, it's the simplest race that we've seen this year in terms of strategy, because it seemed to have been only the Tyrrells and the Minardis and the Pacifics that have made 2 stops. All the rest of the field are making one, dividing the race into 2 35 lap or 134, 135 lap sectors.
In their case, probably because they've got small fuel tanks and really can't go the one-stop distance. So Schumacher on lap 31 is leading by nearly 13 seconds. A good news, incidentally, as you look at Rubens Barrichello's Jordan, look underneath it, and you'll see that it's casting a shadow, and that means that at least there is some sunshine. It's been there for some time. The course is now well and truly dry. The skies are a lot lighter, and mercifully it looks as though we are going to have a dry Canadian Grand Prix as we join Rubens Barrichello. And on lap 31, Michael Schumacher leads Alesi by 12 seconds. He leads Berger by 17 seconds. Hill is third, 21 seconds behind the leader. Fifth is Rubens Barrichello, 31 seconds behind. Eddie Irvine is in sixth place, 36 seconds behind. Olivier Panis and Martin Brundle are 7th and 8th in the Ligiers. 9th is Gianni Morbidelli in the Arrows, and 10th is Mark Blundell in the McLaren, as we join Rubens Barrichello, who richly deserves to do well in this race. He's been overshadowed by his comparatively new teammate Eddie Irvine, who first drove for the Jordan team in 1993 in Japan, and Rubens was starting to get a bit rattled about it, but he's really got himself together here in Canada. He drove extremely well in qualifying, not quite as well as Irvine, and he's going extremely well in the race, 5th place.
He is indeed, because he's currently taking half a second a lap off Damon Hill. He's closed the gap. It's now 9.7 seconds. Barrichello lapping in the 1 minute 30.0, 30.9. And Damon Hill being about half a second slower at the moment. But I'm interested to see that the gap between Schumacher and Jean Alesi is seeming to remain constant, and that's something of a surprise, because the form that we've seen throughout the weekend in practice and in the qualifying sessions has had Schumacher being at least half a second, probably 3/4 to 1 second faster than Jean Alesi. So either Schumacher is pacing himself a little bit, and there's no reason why he shouldn't, because 12.5 seconds is a pretty good lead at this distance, or that he's got some kind of problem with the handling of his car that doesn't mean he's entirely happy with it.
I can tell you that the Williams mechanics are out in the pit lane getting ready to receive Damon Hill, who of course is the only Williams driver left after the lap 1 retirement of David Coulthard when he spun out in front of the two Ferraris, and the Ferrari mechanics are there too. Now, is it going to be that man, Jean Alesi, second, now 14.4 seconds behind Michael Schumacher, or Gerhard Berger, who comes in first? And for that matter, are they all going to come in on the same lap? Schumacher, Alesi and Berger. We're on lap 32 now, 69 lap race. So we're looking for lap 34, lap 35 for half distance. We're virtually at half distance now. No question at all about what the tyre strategy is. It's going to be one stop. Schumacher is consolidating that lead, but as Jonathan has just pointed out, certainly not increasing it. As Gerhard Berger, once again in third position. It's a bit disappointing, frankly, that the Ferraris are not going better, because virtually since the season began, they have been saying, yes, our cars are getting better, and yes, we're not unhappy with development, but the time to watch us is going to be the Canadian Grand Prix, because we have some new parts that will further improve the performance and get us up to the level of Benetton and Williams. That's what they said. That development was delayed, of course, by the fact that both Alesi and Berger had their cars very badly damaged in Monaco, and they've had to be rebuilt. So if they were aiming to do well in Canada and haven't done as well as they would like to have done, let us hope that it comes good for Ferrari in the French Grand Prix in 3 weeks' time.
And there's the evidence that Schumacher's really turning up the wick now. He's sped up by about half a second a lap, in the knowledge surely that he's coming into the pits within the next 3 or 4 laps for his new tyres. As into the pits comes, looks like Irvine, yes, Eddie Irvine, who closed to within 3.9 seconds of Rubens Barrichello. Irvine in 6th, Barrichello in 5th. A good close battle there. You can see the refuelling nozzle on the right-hand side coming down, being held onto the side of the car. And it's going to be a longer stop than normal because, of course, it's just one stop with a lot more fuel to go in. Although this looks too long. This looks very long indeed. 15 seconds. Now that is surely 16 seconds. There must have been some kind of problem there, because a refueling stop for one stop, I would have thought, should take something around about 10 or 11 seconds.
half distance at the end of this lap. Here is the man that's going to get there first, Michael Schumacher. He's just gone round the first man in under 1:30, 1:29.468, the fastest lap of the race, and he's coming up to Mark Blundell's McLaren, which is in 10th place to lap Blundell. The McLaren has improved a bit here, but they're still, on their own admission, way off the pace.
And if you think the car looks a bit different, you're absolutely right, because the McLaren is now devoid of that mid-wing behind the driver's head. And Alesi's in for his stop now. Alesi's first stop. Let's watch this one.
From second position. Now, remember, Eddie Irvine took 16 seconds. They've got to take on a lot of fuel. They've got to take on enough fuel to go half the race, and that's the indication. Remember, take off 3 seconds for putting the nozzle in, taking the nozzle out, so call it 13 seconds, and his time there of some 16 seconds was virtually identical to that of, and Hill is in, and out Damon Hill. So now Berger has, Alesi has stopped, Hill has stopped, Berger has gone up to second position but has got to come in. We're looking at Barrichello now, and he's had his first stop, which you've just seen. We're going out of the pit lane with him now as somebody in front fishtails. Now this could be the lap that man, Michael Schumacher, race leader, 21 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger, comes in. As you look at Olivier Panis having a long stop in the Ligier. The fuel filler is still in, the wheels are on the ground, the tyres and wheels have been changed. Lots of revs, a shoot of flame out of the back, and that looked like a long delayed pit stop. I imagine that there was trouble with the left front wheel, which I couldn't see very clearly. And Schumacher is now at the hairpin. He's only got a few hundred yards now, and Berger is out, he slows right down, hand up. Gerhard Berger, who had still got to come in and make his pit stop, second position. It looks as though he's not going to finish third in this race, but Gerhard Berger is touring in the Ferrari. Once again, the luck has been on Michael Schumacher's side, but of course, to be lucky, it's not enough to be lucky, you've got to be good, and he's certainly that. And all the signs are, with Gerhard Berger's visor up as he crawls into the pit lane in the Ferrari, that he is definitely out of the Canadian Grand Prix. So there's just one Ferrari left, there is just one Benetton left, there is just one Williams left. There are, however, still 2 Jordans left and 2 Ligiers left. I expect there are going to be retirements at the front before this race finishes. The Ferrari mechanics leap onto Gerhard Berger's car. Now, up it goes.
Yes, I think it must have been out of fuel. He must have been on the radio saying that he was out of fuel in the Ferrari. We know the Ferrari is heavy on fuel consumption, but nevertheless, maybe the engine is not running as it should be, a little bit richer. That is one explanation, but certainly the way that Berger was coasting in there, he must have been radioing to those mechanics, and very fortunate for Berger that if that is the problem, yes, and it's fired up again, that he should run out so very near the end of that lap, because he's going to get back into the race, and the car, I'm sure, will be absolutely fine after that, although of course he will have lost maybe 20 seconds. We'll have to wait and see, as there is Blundell in for his stop too.
And now is the time to sit back and consider the effect of all these fuel and tyre stops. Because now Alesi has stopped, Hill has stopped, Barrichello has stopped, Brundle is up into 5th position and has not stopped. Panis is 6th, Irvine is 6th and has stopped, as has Panis, who is 7th. But he hasn't, and he is Michael Schumacher. But he's got a mammoth lead now, a gigantic lead. 50 seconds lead over Alesi. He can come in, stop, change the tyres and wheels, refuel, change his oil, wipe his visor, have a cup of tea, and still rejoin in the lead in the Benetton.
And of course, all the important parts of that, i.e. putting in the fuel, are taking around about 14 or 15 seconds. It's the first time that we've seen any of the front runners taking on a full, maybe 110 litres. And this circuit has the greatest fuel consumption of any circuit, and that means that the fuel load that's going in is higher than anywhere else. And couple this high total fuel load for the race together with making just one stop. That's why the stops are so long here.
Now look at the way Michael Schumacher conserves his fuel, notwithstanding the fact that he's leading this race by 50 seconds. Everybody else has been in. Alesi's been in, Hill's been in, Barrichello's been in, so has Irvine, so has Brundle, so has Berger. But the depressing Michael Schumacher, from the point of view of everybody else in the race, just soldiers on at a speed faster than anyone else, continually building his lead. And this really is an immensely depressing situation. That's Alesi, who is second, 52 seconds behind Schumacher. This is an immensely depressing situation for the other teams, because although the characteristics of Monaco and Canada are different, Michael Schumacher is proving to be as crushingly dominant here in Montreal as he was in Monaco. And the Benetton pit crew is ready now. Kenny Handkammer will be getting ready to lift up the front of the Benetton. Steve Matchett will be getting ready to lift up the back of the Benetton. There are 18 people involved in refueling and changing the tyres and wheels in the Benetton team. You'll be able to see them all at work very shortly. And John Alesi has not got a hope of getting that first place unless Michael Schumacher has a problem whilst he is stopped. Here he is, now he's coming in. This is Michael Schumacher on lap 38, coming in for his only fuel and tyre stop of the race. Now count those mechanics if you can, you'll have a job because they work so fast and so close. But there are 18 of them, and already the front and both the fronts are on. It's the fueling that takes the time. It only takes about 5 or 6 seconds to change the tyres, and that is an absolutely mega stop. 16 seconds for Eddie Irvine, 16 seconds for Jean Alesi, 13 seconds for Michael Schumacher. The Benetton team is the best here, not only just as far as the driver is concerned, the engine, Renault is concerned, the car, but also the pit stop. Superlative.
Yes, I think we ought to qualify that comment by the fact that whilst that stop was the best, and the Benetton team are, to my mind, the best at making the pit stops, the Benetton team actually had to put less fuel in because Schumacher stayed out for longer, some 5 laps longer than most of the other cars, and that would have meant the amount of fuel that they had to put in the Benetton to complete the race distance was less, and therefore that's a reason why the stop should have been a little shorter than that for Damon Hill and the Ferrari of Alesi, but not quite that much.
And it does underline just how good Michael Schumacher is, not just at driving quickly, but driving economically. He had to have less fuel put in as a result of the fact he's got less distance to go now. Where from lap 39 out of 69, Michael Schumacher's lead over Alesi has come down to a mere 30 seconds, 3-0, half a minute, devastating for the others. Damon Hill is 40 seconds behind Schumacher and 10 behind Alesi in third position. Barrichello and Irvine are inching up the points table because Barrichello is now fourth in the Jordan Peugeot and Eddie Irvine is fifth. Are we going to see both Jordans finishing in the top 6 for the first time this year? Panis in the Ligier, a very capable driver, as Schumacher is leading Gerhard Berger there. Panis is 6th, Brundle is 7th in the Ligier, so both the Ligiers are doing well. Gerhard Berger, as you can see, has been lapped. He's in 8th position as a result of having to coast in. And whilst he was unlucky to run out of fuel, or bad planning, whichever way you like to look at it, my goodness, he was jolly lucky to run out of fuel where he did. And Blundell is in 9th position as out of the race goes Bertrand Gachot. Tony Jardine has news for us.
Well, alongside the mechanics in the Benetton pit, and as you said, Murray, it was a very smooth and a very well-drilled organisation that was excellent. They're all smiling here in the Benetton pit, but by contrast, next door at Williams, there are grim, long faces on the Williams personnel. Some of the mechanics are understandably looking very dejected. I asked the Williams personnel if Damon has radioed in at all with any problems, and they said none whatsoever. The only call he made was to check on the other teams and which other teams were on a one-stop strategy.
Well, we know that Williams had a major handling problem, no traction in the wet warm-up this morning. We know, of course, that Michael Schumacher was ahead of both of them when the conditions were dry for qualifying yesterday. So, quite obviously, they won't need me to tell them, the Williams team have got, as they said they had after Monaco, a lot of work to do to catch up with Benetton in a situation where at the beginning of the season it really did look as though the boot was going to be on the other foot and that Williams had caught and passed Benetton. And now Eddie Irvine, there he is catching, and will he pass his teammate in the identical looking Jordan Peugeot, Rubens Barrichello, who is in 5th place. This is the closest battle in the top 6, because on lap 41 Schumacher leads Alesi by 26 seconds. Yes, I know the gap has come down by 4 seconds. I'm keeping a very careful eye on it, but it will be as a result of the pit stop. Bertrand Gachot having a chat with somebody as we watch the battle between Irvine, there he is, and Barrichello in front of him for 5th position.
Now, teammates they may be, but Eddie Irvine will be determined to get ahead of Rubens Barrichello. He's really stamped his authority on the Jordan team and his superior pace to Barrichello throughout this year. He's out-qualified Barrichello every race so far, and in fact Irvine was fortunate to out-qualify Rubens Barrichello here, because he spun on his very first lap in the qualifying session yesterday on Saturday and had to watch as his time gradually slipped down the leaderboard, but nevertheless it was still left just 1 ahead of Rubens Barrichello. Irvine really is tremendously confident. He has a great deal of driving flair, and the only area where people seem to think that he's got a little bit more to find is in the area of discipline and not making mistakes. And making a mistake was something which he did last year. He spun out of the race on the very last corner into the pit wall whilst going well, and let's just hope for his sake that he doesn't make the same mistake there. While Olivier Panis is in 6th place now. He's 7 seconds ahead of Martin Brundle in 7th, so Panis going very well. Panis being 24 seconds behind the Jordan there of Eddie Irvine. But this certainly, the Barrichello-Irvine battle, is the one to watch. And incidentally, both the Jordan cars have the 7-speed gearbox. This is the only car in the Grand Prix field to have 7 gears, and that's an advantage, particularly on a fast circuit like this, when it's all about acceleration, straight line speed, and really punching out of these slow corners as quickly as you can. And again, that was why that performance advantage from Alesi in the Ferrari was of such good effect to help him get by Damon Hill.
Sunday afternoon in Montreal, Canada, but it is Sunday evening in Britain. And if you've just come in, the situation is that we're on lap 42 with Michael Schumacher again showing that he's very much the top man of Grand Prix racing in 1995, leading the Ferrari of Jean Alesi by 26 seconds. But on the very beginning of the race we had drama when Johnny Herbert and Mika Häkkinen collided with each other at one of the early corners and took each other out of the race. There'll be a lot of discussion about who was responsible for that. David Coulthard spun, being pushed very hard by the 2 Ferraris on the first lap, and Jean-Christophe Bouillon has gone out of the race, driving very well indeed in only his 2nd race in the Sauber. Heinz-Harald Frentzen has retired as well, so too has Bertrand Gachot, but that's not a bad rate of retirement because we're up to lap 43 out of 69. That means only 6 retirements out of the 24 who started, 18 left, 24 started because sadly, as I said earlier on, there are no Simtex here. They have major cash flow problems which they hope to have resolved, as we all hope they will, by the French Grand Prix.
Well, I think this must be a fairly sobering time for the Williams team. As we know, they started off the season in such good form, with Hill and Coulthard both being right at the front, but that man, Michael Schumacher, and the Benetton team have progressively reeled in Williams, and they have now moved ahead, swept ahead, and in fact Hill is progressively slipping back from Alesi now. He's now 13.5 seconds behind Alesi, and in qualifying we saw both Hill and Coulthard. Hill qualified on a 1 minute 28.0, Coulthard on a 28.0 as well, just 600 slower, and then there was a 0.2 of a second gap. That's 2/10 back to Gerhard Berger, another 2/10 back to John Alesi. So in qualifying, Williams did have the advantage over Ferrari, with Schumacher being half a second ahead of Damon Hill, but this seems to have been turned around in the race. And this is a characteristic that we have seen a bit. It seems that Williams still just are slipping back a little on race pace, and certainly until this race their reliability hasn't been too good. They spent 2 days at Silverstone testing, working on gearbox improvements, which I sincerely hope have done the job. This is a circuit which will throw up any gearbox weakness, there's no doubt about it. All of these long straights and the slow corners mean lots of gearbox work, in fact 52 gear shifts per lap. And I'm sure there's going to be continued work back there at Didcot, because the team, led by Frank Williams and Patrick Head, really will be unhappy about this level of performance and determined to do something about it.
Yeah, and an added depressing point for Williams is the fact that they've been using the Renault engine for, I think this is the 5th year of their association with Renault. It's Benetton's first year, and Benetton have certainly scored a point here, because if you look closely at the sides of the car and the wing, look at the wing, it has the word Renault on it, and it was due to carry the words Motorsport. And Benetton decided that they were so delighted with the 100th pole position for Renault, which they got yesterday, or which they got on Friday actually, because Schumacher's Friday time was faster than his Saturday time, that they would take those Motorsport words off and put Renault big and bold on the rear wing and the side of the car. And in their first year of association with the French team, that won't be very heartening for Williams. But they'll come back. They've been in Grand Prix racing for a long time. They've won a lot of races. They won a lot of championships. And Damon Hill is still fighting hard in 3rd position. We're in lap 44 now, out of 69, with Schumacher leading Alesi by a massive 28 seconds. Schumacher's going to win this race by a country mile, provided he just keeps going. Alesi, as Jonathan has said, is 13.5 seconds ahead of Hill, who is 13.5 seconds ahead of Barrichello, who's fighting for that 4th position with Eddie Irvine. Let's hope they don't hit each other. It would be dreadful for Jordan if both of them went out, particularly as a result of hitting each other. But Harness and Brundle are still 7th and 8th, so it's the story is Ligier, Jordan, Williams, Ferrari, and of course Benetton, the leader.
And Schumacher now coming up to lap Martin Brundle in the Ligier Honda, and Brundle is now just 4.2 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. So if we see, there he is, Gerhard Berger there, and Berger lapping some 1 second slower than Michael Schumacher at the moment, and that's going to be quite a source of, there we are, that's Gerhard Berger coming up to go by Taki Inui too, and we're going to see very frustrated Gerhard Berger, I think, once again. He was outdriven by John Alesi last year here, and it appears to be the same thing, although we do know that he had the problem, of course, losing the time because of the fuel starvation and running out of fuel, but nevertheless he had slipped a little behind John Alesi. But interestingly, although John Alesi this year has tended overall to be the quicker of the two, it's been Gerhard Berger that's tended to pick up the points to bring that bit more consistent. And despite that, there are also rumours going around that Jean Alesi will not be continuing with Ferrari in 1996.
Schumacher goes through and completes his 45th lap. Now there's a very interesting potential point coming up, and that is that the next person to be lapped by Michael Schumacher will be Martin Brundle, who is 7th and 1 minute 32 seconds behind the leader. But then Jean Alesi will be coming up to Martin Brundle. And to say that there is bad blood between Alesi and Brundle, as opposed to between Brundle and Alesi, would be a masterpiece of understatement. Alesi went off in Monaco as a result of Martin Brundle spinning in front of him. They didn't touch each other, but Alesi was positively vitriolic in his criticism of Martin Brundle afterwards, which incidentally I do not think was justified, but that's another story. But they've had a lot of run-ins with each other, and you've got the opposites of a very calm and phlegmatic Englishman and a very highly strung, emotional French Sicilian at the opposite end of the spectrum, and they'll be encountering each other, I think, before the end of this race. Alesi's lapping in about 1 minute 33. So's Martin Brundle at the moment, actually. He's going extremely well. 7 seconds behind his teammate. 6th position, Olivier Panis. 5th is still Irvine. 4th is still Barrichello in the Jordan Peugeots. And the Peugeot people will be keeping their fingers crossed, because their entree, there's Barrichello, there is Irvine. So this is the battle for 4th position as they come out of turn 8. They're doing about 160 miles an hour here and accelerating, then down to the east hairpin.
Indeed, here's the best battle. That's 0.9 of a second, the gap that we're looking at. But from looking from the viewer's point of view, it's easy to think, well, why doesn't Eddie Irvine just put his foot down and pick up a bit of speed and get by Rubens Barrichello? But inside these two cars, the drivers are driving with their foot absolutely to the floor for every fraction of a second they possibly can. For any viewer who's used to going to an indoor kart circuit and having the feeling of being absolutely flat out and with your foot barely lifting from the throttle on a kart and being able to do nothing to try to go any faster. That's what it feels like for these guys, although instead of having 5 horsepower, they've got about 705. And yet, with the level of driving expertise you need in Formula One, you can absolutely wring the neck of the cars, driving consistently within 0.2 of a second around a 4.5 kilometre or 3-mile circuit. They are really right on the edge, pushing to the limit all the time, and to chip away and close for Eddie Irvine to close that gap and to get it down from maybe 0.9 of a second to 0.5 of a second really demands a huge effort. But of course, that's one thing catching up, and as we said so often, getting by is another thing. And in this race, because we've got this simplified fuel strategy of just stopping once, we're going to see the drivers have to resort, as Eddie Irvine may well do here, if he's going to get by Rubens Barrichello, to actually racing on the track and being able to come up behind, getting in the slipstream, pulling by, as Gerhard Berger is surely about to do with Martin Brundle ahead of him. Berger is now just 1 second behind Martin Brundle. Berger, of course, recovering from having lost all that time when he ran out of fuel. And we'll then see how Ferrari horsepower there compared with the Ferrari compares to Ligier and the Honda horsepower. But I think Berger will find a way by Brundle pretty quickly, and Martin will no doubt be reflecting on the accusations from Alesi and Ferrari that he'd actually held up the Ferrari of Alesi at Monaco, and I suspect he'll let Berger go by without too much of a problem, although we shouldn't forget they are nevertheless racing for 7th place. So Martin's not going to give it up, but I think he'll be fair about the whole thing, and that's the important thing.
Katayama is about to be passed by both of them. He's already 4 laps behind. Gerhard Berger goes past the Tyrrell Yamaha, and sadly they have disappointed this season. The new Harvey Postlethwaite car is an exceptionally good one. The Yamaha V10 engine is excellent, but somehow it just hasn't gelled this season yet. Mika Salo from Finland in his first season with the Tyrrell team, in only his 6th race, is in 11th position. Again, he is out driving Ukko Katayama, who's been with the team and in Formula One much longer. And we're on lap 48 now, soon to be lap 49, as Berger in 8th position closes up on Martin Brundle, who is 7th. Schumacher is going through soon to complete his 48th lap, and he's leading Alesi now by over half a minute, 31 seconds, with the race in his pocket, provided he just keeps going. And it's difficult, frankly, to see any changes in the first 4, because Schumacher is 31 seconds ahead of Alesi. Alesi is 11 seconds ahead of Hill. Hill is 14 seconds ahead of Barrichello. Irvine has got just 1 second less than that now. That's where the interest is. And Irvine in 5th position is 28 seconds ahead of Parnis, who is 8 seconds ahead of Brundle. So the race is, the interest really is between Brundle, between Parnis, Brundle and Berger, 6th, 7th and 8th, and between Barrichello and Irvine, who are 4th and 5th.
And Berger here really attacking, really driving hard, and Berger's exuberant style is such a pleasure to watch. Just about 30 seconds ago we saw him power slide the car out of one of the second gear corners, literally laying 2 lines of black rubber as he put that 720 odd Ferrari horsepower down onto the ground, trying to catch up to Martin Brundle. In fact, I think also we saw him just put a wheel on the dirt coming into one of the right-left chicanes and lose a little bit of time as he corrected it. But that's certainly the battle there to look out for. But the good news is that Damon Hill is actually not dropping back any further from Jean Alesi. He's 11.3 seconds, and it had been up to 13 seconds at some point. Traffic, I'm sure, being an influence on that. And that's Mark Blundell out. This has been a totally miserable race for the McLaren team, with Hakkinen being out on lap 1, or even starting before that, with Mark Blundell spinning after a problem, we think, with his car on the warm-up in the first laps as he came onto the grid, and then Hakkinen going out on lap 1, and now Blundell out. The McLaren going a little bit better in qualifying. They've taken off the mid-wing, as we were saying, from that McLaren in the quest for straight-line speed. They've got new dampers on the car, but this race was due to be Mark Blundell's last definite race before his future was going to be reappraised. I suspect it'll continue. I very much hope so. It's hard to think of anybody who's available who could do a better job at the moment than Mark Blundell, with a car that still clearly is no match for the front-running teams of Ferrari, Benetton and Williams.
And whilst there's been a lot of controversy about whether it was right for Nigel Mansell and McLaren to part company amicably, as they appear to have done, if Nigel Mansell is watching this, and I imagine he is, he will probably be saying, well, if that had been my car, that would have been a retirement for me. And as a world champion and an American champion and a 31 times Grand Prix winner, I wouldn't want to be there. But McLaren have emphasised that they know they've got a problem, just as lower down the field Pacific have got a problem. It's basically to make the car go faster and to be reliable. And they're working on it desperately hard. There's an enormous number of people at Woking. There's a gigantic budget behind them and nothing will be spared. But the fact is that McLaren have not gone really well since they lost Honda engines first and then sadly lost Ayrton Senna when he went to the Williams team last year. It's been a struggle, it's continuing to be a struggle, but they will continue to fight. Lap 31, Schumacher 32 seconds ahead of Alesi. Hill is still third, 10 seconds behind the Ferrari. Still fourth and fifth, the two Jordans, Barrichello and Irvine. Still sixth and seventh, the two Ligers, Parnis and Brundle. Brundle has been lapped, Schumacher has lapped everybody up to Olivier Parnis. It is another crushing Schumacher, Benetton, Renault demonstration of superiority.
And that's Luca Badoer in the other Minardi ahead there of Schumacher, who is now sweeps by going, this is what it would have looked like as Hakkinen tried to go up the inside of Johnny Herbert there into that hairpin. But you know, Formula One now, this is the 6th race of the season, has really sorted itself out this season with 4, I believe, quite distinct divisions of performance of team. In the first division, we've got Benetton, we've got Williams and Ferrari. And the budgets of Ferrari, who knows? But probably Benetton and Williams run on something round about maybe $30 million a year plus supply of the engines being a big factor, and clearly at the moment we've got Benetton leading Division 1. Division 2 has been McLaren and Jordan now, these two teams locked in combat for most of the year. Jordan team probably run on something of a budget of perhaps around about $20 million for the year, together with supply of their Peugeot engines, whilst McLaren are very much in the first division in terms of budget, probably with something more like $40–45 million. So we've got Jordan leading Division 2. Now down to Division 3, and we've got 4 teams that comprise that. We've got Tyrrell, we've got Sauber, Ligier and Footwork. And to run in Division 3, you need around about maybe $15 million a year plus your engines. And the leader of Division 3 at the moment is Olivier Panis, really having his best race of the season, currently in 6th place. And that leaves the 4th division. That's Minardi, the Simtech team, of course, who are not here. They've missed this race. We just hope they can recover and compete again this season, but we don't know at the moment. Pacific and the 40 team. And to run in, there's the 40 on the back there. And it's Damon Hill stopping. Damon Hill out as David Coulthard. Out furiously comes his steering wheel. The 9th and in many ways the most important retirement of the race. And that is terrible news, not just for Damon psychologically and in terms of World Championship points. You can see from his body language how angry he is. He stopped right at the pit lane. He only had to get over the wall and climb it to be in his garage. And so now Barrichello is up into 3rd place, Irvine is up into 4th place, Parnis is up into 5th, and Brundle is up into 6th. It's certainly going to be different at the end of this race after Michael Schumacher comes home. And we're in lap 52 now, 17 laps of this 2.75-mile Canadian Grand Prix circuit, the Gilles Villeneuve circuit on the Ile Notre Dame to go. That's the leader, and Alesi has got to keep going just to finish in 2nd place. There's Gerhard Berger, who of course has been lapped by the race leader, and the order on lap 53 now in this 69 lap race. Schumacher leads, Alesi 2nd, Barrichello 3rd, Jordan, Irvine 4th, Jordan 5th and 6th, the Ligers of Parnis and Brundle. 7th is Gerhard Berger, who is still fighting with Martin Brundle. There they are. This is the battle for 6th position, and Martin Brundle, knowing that he's got this race and the French Grand Prix and the British Grand Prix, and incidentally, if there is a 17th Grand Prix this year, which there's likely to be, I think Martin will have the seat in the Ligier instead of Aguri Suzuki, the Japanese driver. But Martin will be hanging on desperately to get that single point for 6th position. Well, desperate disappointment, and more than that from Damon Hill, frustration. He really was clearly hugely angry to retire from a race when he at least thought he could pick up 3 points, and reliability or lack of it has been something which I know has been getting to him of late. He's desperate to get points even if he can't win Grand Prix in his quest for championship success. But here we're going to see some good race driving, I hope, because Gerhard Berger is going to be determined to wrest that 6th place there from Martin Brundle, but Brundle's going to know he's up to 6th place, and that means points. And Brundle will want to do everything that he legitimately can to prevent Gerhard Berger getting by. Now we shall well see him take the inside line into corners. That's just keeping on the inside. He doesn't need to at the moment because Berger is not close enough. But as Berger starts to look very close indeed, expect to see Brundle move across to the inside and effectively block Berger and prevent him coming by. Now that one can do, but what one cannot do is weave across the road and literally physically force an overtaking car off the road or off the side of the track. And it's going to be interesting to see how Brundle manages to use tactics to keep that 6th place. He's got another 14, 15 laps to go, and I believe he's got a chance of doing it.
The vastly experienced Martin Brundle, 132 Grand Prix, against the even more experienced Gerhard Berger, 169 Grand Prix. But while you watch this, I'll tell you that no points for Williams means that they are going to lose the 2nd place in the Constructors' Championship to Ferrari, who have got a Lacey in the top 6, a Lacey who is 2nd, and Gerhard Berger in the top 6 if he can get past Martin Brundle, although that's obviously going to be very difficult. And it means too that Damon Hill has got an even greater gap between him and Michael Schumacher. Hill will still be leading, will still be 2nd in the championship, but he'll be another 10 points. He'll be 15 points behind Michael Schumacher. So let's concentrate on this. Martin Brundle, V10 Mugen-powered Ligier. Mugen means Honda, and Honda would like to come back into Grand Prix racing full-time, we hope. We remember the good times that they had with McLaren and, of course, with Williams. And if they do come back full-time, it might well be with Ligier. There's a battle going on in the courts. Minardi think that they had the Mugen engine tied up for this season. It went instead to the Ligier team, and Minardi are contesting it in the courts. How strong their case is, I don't know. But the engine is a cracker, no doubt about that. Look at the way Martin is going. He can see Gerhard Berger big in his mirrors. This is the battle for 6th position on lap 55 of the 69-lap Canadian Grand Prix, as the Ligier and the Ferrari, Brundle and Gerhard Berger, come up to the Tyrrell of Mika Salo, because now Ukyo Katayama has retired. There are 9 retirements. This is the hairpin, very slow. Salo, first timer here, he's driving extremely well. It's his first time in Canada, as it is his first time at nearly all the circuits.
Now Brundle's going to desperately hope here that Salo moves across, lets Brundle go through when the time is right, and that's more or less now. Salo is some 9 seconds clear of Luco Badoa, who's in 10th place, and therefore he does not, no, he hasn't got through now. Now we're coming into the right-left before the main start-finish line as Hill's car gets craned out of the way. This is where Salo should keep to the right, let Brundle go through on the left-hand side, but Berger will want to have a go at capitalising on the whole lot if we're not careful.
We're trying to get a word with Damon Hill, who has just angrily gone into the motorhome, has shouted something at Frank Williams. I can't tell you what it was because I don't know, but Tony Jardine is literally doorstepping the motorhome in the hope of getting an angry Damon Hill to come out and tell us what happened and what his attitude about it is. Lap 56. This is the battle between Martin Brundle and Gerhard Berger for the 6th position and the last World Championship point in the Canadian Grand Prix. And Gerhard pushing. He's been in the points in every race this year. He has been 3rd in every race this year, except one when he was in 6th position, Gerhard Berger, and that was in Argentina. So he will be looking to maintain his record of points in every Grand Prix and underline Ferrari performance and reliability. Great scrap this is. Looking back at Gerhard Berger. They go inside Mika Salo, who moves over and lets them through. Accelerate away up to the chicane now. Hard left. Then there it is. Brundle goes in. Berger follows him.
Well, that was good driving there from Mika Salo. I was on the verge of saying something else if he hadn't let Brundle go by for too much longer. But for a driver looking in his mirrors, and we could see Salo doing that, a car that's following can often appear to be quite far away, in fact, and one can think that with increased pace that Salo might have been applying, that he was holding off Martin Brundle. But the reality of it is that it is difficult for a driver to get any closer than half a second to the car in front because of the effects of the turbulent air coming off the back of all those wings. As the closer one gets, closer than about 30 metres, the airflow to your own car is distorted on the approach, and that means less grip from the car, and your car starts to slide around more. And so for that reason, drivers who are not being careful, such as Martini, as we saw earlier on, can often believe that the car that's following hasn't got close enough yet to justify moving over for, and that of course is quite wrong.
No more fuel and tyre stops left. The race is going to go through to the end now with no more stops. Schumacher is just maintaining his rhythm, keeping up his momentum, listening to his radio, watching his pit signals, knowing that with a 33-second cushion between himself and the Ferrari, he can afford to lose quite a bit of time on each of the 13 laps that are left, including the one he's on, and still come home the winner. And that would give him his 4th victory of 1995, further to increase his World Championship lead over the retired Damon Hill, who's just gone out with some problem we don't know about.
And indeed, as Damon Hill retired, I was just in the throes of explaining about the 4th division and the various divisions of Formula One and the budgets required to compete, saying that 3rd division was around about $15 million plus a supply of engines, and this is very close now for Berger, but still not close enough, I don't think. Now the 4th division of the Minardi team, the Simtech, who are of course not here, Pacific and 40, you need somewhere between $5 and $10 million to compete at that level if anyone's thinking of doing so.
Lap 58, out of the Senna turn, through turns 3 and 4, up to that very, very difficult turn 5. This is it. Look for the tyres on the right. They're the ones that Barrichello thumped into yesterday. Gearbox first, having already hit the Armco on the right, and he was doing about 140 miles an hour even after it. Schumacher there. He's slowing. Schumacher's slowing. Michael Schumacher is in trouble in the Canadian Grand Prix on lap 58. He's not touring, but he's going a heck of a lot slower than he was before. Does this mean to say that we are going to see a Ferrari win the Canadian Grand Prix, and that Alesi is going to be the man who does it on his birthday? Schumacher's losing time all the time. He's on lap 58 now. It's a 69-lap race. He is very definitely going to have to come in at minimum. He's round the hairpin now. This is a highly dramatic development, to put it very mildly indeed. Remember, Michael Schumacher went out at San Marino when he had a crash, and he has won all the other races except Argentina, where he finished 3rd. So now look at the Minardi, which is miles an hour slower, and the Ferrari enthusiasts are going mad. They can smell victory for Jean Alesi. And wouldn't it be wonderful? Terribly bad luck for Benetton, for Schumacher, of course, but hopes all round the world, I'm sure, are that Ferrari is going to do it. Well, Michael Schumacher's had a good fair whack of wins into the pits, and we're going to be watching very carefully indeed to see Jean Alesi take the lead, and it looks to me as though it's a retirement. The steering wheel comes out, Michael Schumacher will come out. This is the end of his race.
Well, it may not be. I think if they're looking at changing wheels, it could be a gear selection problem. The gear selection switches are on the steering wheel of the car, and Schumacher could have been stuck in a gear, and I think that's what's probably happened there. They've got the computer on the side. They're going to look at reprogramming the electronics of the car, and I'm sure it relates to gear change, but either way, he's still going to be out of the race in terms of leading.
Alesi leads the Canadian Grand Prix on lap 59 out of 69. Rubens Barrichello goes up into 2nd place. Eddie Irvine goes up into 3rd place. Jordan and Peugeot are going to finish well up, and it looks as though both of them are going to finish if they just keep going. Michael Schumacher has got the engine going again, but he's slipping down all the time. He's currently in 4th place. He's currently in 5th place because Panis has gone through. He will soon be in 6th position because Michael Schumacher, because Brundle will be going through. Gerhard Berger will be up into 6th position, and Brundle will be 5th. Keep out of the way, says the mechanic to the cameraman.
Now let's try and listen to the engine of that Benetton to see if he's now got gear changing capability. He's now in the pit lane, the 120km speed limit applying. We've lost him, but we'll watch his lap times, and indeed the way he's going now looks straight away to me as if they've managed to fix the problem. He's going quicker already than he was able to before, and we need to see how much time he's lost in that, and that was 1 minute 32 seconds Schumacher has lost that will put him back to something like 8th place.
There is race leader Jean Alesi. Michael Schumacher is down to 7th place. There are 10 laps left, including the one that is left, the one that they're on, and the Ferrari flags are flying high in Montreal.
Well, I must say, if anyone can benefit from Michael Schumacher's bad luck there, I'll be delighted if it's Jean Alesi there, because apart from being his birthday, he has yet to win a Grand Prix, incredibly. And to win your first Grand Prix on your birthday will be emotional for anybody, but it'll be particularly so for Jean Alesi, and it'll actually also take Ferrari through to 105 Grand Prix wins to make them the most successful Grand Prix team in history. That's currently tying between McLaren and Ferrari on 104.
Well, I don't know how you feel at home. I can tell you I'm nearly through the roof here. This is a terrific development, and Alesi now is up, and Gerhard Berger is up, right up with the rear wing of Martin Brundles-Ligier, who is still staving off Berger, who tries hard again as they come through to complete the lap and start a new one. They're in 5th and 6th places. Incidentally, the highest position that Jordan have ever had in a Grand Prix is 3rd, and they are currently 2nd and 3rd. That would give them 10 points in the Constructors' Championship. It would raise their stock very high in France, and with Peugeot, here is a replay of Gerhard Berger and Martin Brundle almost coming together at the hairpin. Martin holds his position. He will not be intimidated by Gerhard Berger. I wouldn't like to be trying to intimidate Martin Brundle. He's a very tough chap.
And this is an incredibly demanding time for Brundle, because to have somebody as close behind as that, somebody that you know is quicker, and yet you know that you've got the right to be there all the time that you can, driving in a reasonable way. Martin's going to be spending more time looking in his mirrors than he is going forwards, or certainly very close to it. But it's important that he doesn't make mistakes, because Berger's best chance of getting by Brundle is going to come from pushing Brundle that hard that Brundle will run wide coming out of a corner and perhaps lose momentum and allow Berger to come alongside on the approach to the next and then outbrake him. It's that kind of sequence, and it can take 2 or 3 corners of building up, closing the gap as we look at Jean Alesi out, leading the race now by 22 seconds from Rubens Barrichello. It's going to take a bit of planning there.
Well, Rubens Barrichello,
Damon, do you feel a little bit better knowing that Schumacher's dropped back into the points?
I think for me it's a bit of a help.
Sorry, we know that Damon's round the back of the pits. It's very difficult to get through to him electronically. But Jean Alesi on lap 61 out of 69 is pacing himself, because Barrichello is actually lapping a bit faster, about half a second faster in 2nd place, but he's 21 points, well, over 21 seconds behind the Ferrari, and that is Eddie Irvine, who is 3rd. And if Eddie Irvine finishes in 3rd position in the Jordan, it would be his first time on the podium in a Grand Prix. He's had a 4th, he's had 5th places, he's had a 6th place, but he's never stood up there on the podium, and he's certainly never been there with a teammate, of course. That is Olivier Panis, who is in 4th position, and the order as Panis comes up behind Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi, who's had 2 penalty stops and is in 12th place. The order on lap 62 with 7 to go, under 21 miles, about 20 miles left now, possibly for Jean Alesi to win his first Grand Prix, and for Ferrari to win their first Grand Prix since Germany last year when Gerhard Berger was first. But Alesi leads Barrichello by 22 seconds. Barrichello leads Irvine by 6.6 seconds. And, well, is that a Ferrari on the left? Is it?
I think that's probably Brundle.
It's Berger and Brundle. Berger and Brundle have sorted themselves out. They have resolved their battle by taking each other off. And that, of course, here is a replay. Look, you see, Gerhard Berger, this is turn 1, tries to take Martin Brundle. Well, I'm always loath to blame anybody, because unless you're sitting in the cockpit, you can't know. But now we're looking at it from Brundle's car. This is turn left into turn 1. Now let's see what happens to Gerhard Berger. There he is. He's trying to go through on the inside, but Brundle is already turning in. Berger must have been up on the grass, and if anybody was at fault, Jonathan, I would have said it was Gerhard.
I agree entirely. I think that was tremendously opportunist from Gerhard Berger. He had no real chance of that coming off. He would have known Brundle would have protected the line, and it was actually good for us that Martin Brundle happened to have the one and only rearward-facing camera of any of these cars to capture it, and we could see just how far back Berger was on the approach to that corner. He wasn't even desperately close and able to come up alongside.
Now, Tony Jarnine has been able to talk to Damon Hill, and he can tell us what he said.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we were breaking up behind the pits there, and we were in a huge rugby scrum of press, anxious to talk to Damon. He spoke to us first. He is extremely angry, and he wasn't at all pacified by the fact that Schumacher had dropped back out of the points. He's still angry about the fact that the gearbox had been losing hydraulic pressure, and he was stuck in 6th gear. And he said, we've been going backwards all weekend. We've got to try so much harder. We really are in big trouble. And he said he can't emphasize it enough, and he turned on his heels and walked away.
Well, you can understand him feeling fed up. Not as fed up as he might have done if Michael Schumacher had had another 10 points. Well, the retirements are now up to 12, because as you watch race leader Jean Alesi on lap 63 with 6 to go, out have gone Pierluigi Martini, Martin Brundle, Gerhard Berger, Damon Hill, and Mark Blundell, Ukyo Katayama, Bertrand Gachot, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Jean-Christophe Bouillon, David Coulthard, Johnny Herbert and Mika Hakkinen, and we are now down to 12 runners out of the 24 who started. Exactly half the field has retired, and leading is Alesi. And just as I said that Schumacher had only got to pace himself to victory, only for him to retire, I better not say the same thing about Jean Alesi, although it is true. Barrichello is second, 23 seconds behind. Irvine is still third, and I wouldn't be at all surprised, notwithstanding the fact that Irvine has got a second closer to his teammate, if the Jordan management had not said on the radio, just hold positions, fellas. The last thing we want is to lose second and third places by you hitting each other. And Barrichello certainly wouldn't be anxious to yield to any Irvine. There is Irvine. Given that Barrichello has been consistently beaten by Irvine, and Barrichello will be more than anxious to score World Championship points. He's had a third position in the Jordan team. He's never been on the second step of the podium. It looks as though he could be today. And behind those two, it's still Parnis, the other Ligier, of course, that's David Coulthard on the right with Frank Williams. Parnis is fourth. Schumacher is now back into 5th position, and he's lapping 4 seconds faster than Rubens Barrichello, who is second. But Jean Alesi, as if to sense the danger that he might be in, although it's a very remote danger, has just speeded up a second faster than he was before. And it's still Alesi leading on lap 65, 23 seconds. Schumacher is 18 seconds behind Parnis, so I can't see him doing better than 5th position and 2 points unless somebody in front of him strikes a problem.
Well, you're probably right, but he is lapping 3 seconds a lap faster than Olivier Parnis, who's ahead. I'm sure Parnis can speed up by a second, and that's probably going to be enough to fend off any late charge from Schumacher. But Schumacher, I'm sure, will be on the charge. His times, he's certainly the fastest car out there at the moment by well over 1.5 seconds quicker than anybody else who's running. But the incident we saw there with Berger and Brundle does just emphasise how difficult it is to overtake in Formula One. In qualifying, Berger was 2 seconds a lap faster than Brundle, and one could probably assume that their performance on the track in the race would have given a similar level of difference in pace, in that Brundle was probably lapping around about 2 seconds a lap slower than Berger could have done, because both were on the same fuel strategy of stopping once, and yet Berger could not find a way. There we go, Schumacher, as we said, really turning it on now, setting the fastest race lap. He's got nothing to lose. If he goes off the road now, he'll lose 2 points, which is not going to be of particular significance to him, but what he will be determined to do is try and close that gap, and he's now again taken 3.5 seconds off Parnis. I don't think he's going to make it, but it is going to be close by the end. But it's so difficult, as we were saying, with Brundle and Berger to get an overtaking margin on the brakes, even when you've got Ferrari levels of power and straight line speed, is tremendously difficult. And in fact, Montreal is certainly not one of the hardest circuits to overtake on. It's at best medium. And although the grip of the cars has been reduced this year and the horsepower reduced with the engines coming down from 3.5 litres to 3 litres, these cars are still lapping only 1.5 to 2 seconds slower than they were last year, when they had much more downforce and much more power. And that again just shows how much natural development of technology and therefore pace there is from these cars year by year, and one can't help wondering whether or not we shall see any further regulations to endeavour to slow the cars down and make braking distances longer in the future.
Jean Alesi there, exiting the hairpin to come through and complete his 66th lap out of 69. Really does look as though he is on course for his first ever Grand Prix win. In this, his 91st Grand Prix. And Jean has had some tough luck. He started his Grand Prix career with Tyrrell. I remember at Phoenix, all Formula One enthusiasts will, how he actually led Ayrton Senna in the McLaren and took the lead from him. There's his pit signal going out. Alesi's heart will certainly be beating fast. He's already had a pole position in his career. He's been second 6 times. He's been third 10 times. He's never had a victory. Nobody deserves one more than he does. And Jean Todt, who is the team manager of Ferrari, will, in his inscrutable way, be just ticking off the laps which remain. This is lap 67. There's only lap 68 and 69 between Jean Alesi and the checkered flag and victory, as Eddie Irvine crosses the line in 3rd position. He's now 8 seconds behind Barrichello, so he's either decided to settle for 3rd place, or it's been suggested to him from the Jordan pit that he should do so. Lap 67 then, Alesi, Barrichello, Irvine, Harness in the Ligier, Schumacher flying, and another record lap, 1:29.2, which is 3 seconds faster than Alesi, but it's not going to be enough. Morbidelli is 6th, Salo is 7th, Bader is 8th, Inouye is 9th, Brundle is out, and there are just 9 runners left, but Martin Brundle is currently classified in 10th position.
Yes, I suspect you're right. Schumacher is now 2.5 seconds quicker than Panis, because while Schumacher's gone quicker, Panis has responded just to pull out enough pace to keep himself ahead of Schumacher, and I think he'll be successful. But further back, another driver has driven superbly here today, and that's Gianni Morbidelli in the Arrows car, and that is powered by the Hart V8 engine from the small Harlow-based company, and they've been doing a sterling job throughout the year, running round about 12th, 13th position in qualifying, and there Morbidelli there. And what is sad is that it may be this is Morbidelli's last race, because he does not bring any funds to the team, and the Arrows or the footwork team desperately needs money, and it may be that Morbidelli will be replaced by Pedro Lamy, the Portuguese driver who had his leg smashed in a horrendous Silverstone testing accident at the beginning of last year. And that would be a great shame, because he is an undoubted talent, and one that really does deserve to be in a good car.
Lap 68, Martin Brundle is with Tony Jardine.
Martin, terribly hard luck from where we looked. It looked as if it was Gerhard's fault. What did you think?
Yes, I was defending my line. It looks like Gerhard must have lost it and gone completely out of the vision of my mirrors. And I turned in as per normal speed, and suddenly there was a flying Ferrari coming to tee.
Great disappointment for you, obviously.
Yeah, I've driven a good race, and we've made some good progress in the team. I'm sad for the team we didn't get 2 cars in the points. Hopefully my teammate's going to come home with a good result here, and it'll be a good team weekend.
Are you pleased about Ferrari being ahead at the moment?
No.
Thanks, Martin.
You can always rely on Martin Brundle to give you an honest answer. And Jean Alesi sees P1 on his pit board as he starts his 69th and last lap. Turn 1, turn 2, there are on this lap 15 turns altogether, 15 corners, and Alesi is really within sight of his first and very well deserved victory.
Ferrari having done a great job, and here is the reward here. Alesi having the reliability, and Alesi really responding beautifully. Wonderful victory for Alesi. Gerhard Berger not quite being on the pace and then charging into the back of Martin Brundle. But Benetton probably would have won. We mustn't forget this. Schumacher continues to take fastest laps, lap by lap. And if it hadn't been for what I'm sure was a gear selection problem, he would have been out in front, whilst Williams have clearly got more work to do on pace, they've got more work to do on reliability, and David Coulthard too undoubtedly made a driving error. But Jordan really are one of the heroes of the race here. Second and third place for Jordan is a superb effort, and they really do deserve it thoroughly. Out of the hairpin, that's turn 10, up to the chicane, that is turn 11 out of 15. Jean Alesi potentially victorious, just a few hundred yards, because he's now up to turn 12. The Ferrari mechanics are already leaning over the Armco, ready to greet him home, and what a hero he's going to be, not just here in Canada, but all around the world with Ferrari fans, and particularly, of course, in Italy. Jean Alesi wins the Canadian Grand Prix to euphoric applause all the way round. Everyone will be delighted. I think, well, possibly Michael Schumacher won't be, and Damon Hill won't. But not only does Alesi win, but the fact that he has got 10 World Championship points, and Benetton, by virtue of Schumacher only being in 5th position, scoring 2 points, that means to say that Ferrari goes back into the leadership of the World Championship for Constructors, which they held in Spain, lost at Monaco, and have regained here in Canada. And this is reprehensible, extremely reprehensible. The fans have broken ranks and crowded onto the track. There's some talk of there not being a Canadian Grand Prix next year. And if that is so, the fact that the fans have invaded certainly isn't going to help. They're pouring through holes in the netting. There's one in front of me, and it's a solid wodge of people. But the confirmation is that Jean Alesi has won a superb victory for himself and Ferrari in the Canadian Grand Prix, that Jordan, in the form of Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine, have scored 10 World Championship points, finishing 2nd and 3rd. Ligier have again finished in the points with Olivier Panis, who scored a point in Spain. Michael Schumacher's consolation prize, having led the race for so long, was 2 points for 5th position, and believe it or not, they're still finishing as the fans pour on to the course. I'm sure the FIA, the governing body of motorsport, are going to have some very strong condemnation of people here. And in 6th position is Morbidelli. Now the 9 finishers, only 9 finished out of the 24 who started, and look at Jean Alesi out of the cockpit. Has he kept the engine running? No, he has not. Well, he may conceivably be out of fuel, but I suspect he's just so overcome with emotion in front of this enthusiastic Canadian crowd with so many Ferrari flags, is that he just lost the motor. That's Rubens Barrichello, who's obviously as pleased. And so Alesi getting a lift from Michael Schumacher. And that reminds me of that evocative situation when Nigel Mansell gave Ayrton Senna. Isn't it lovely to see real emotion and happiness? So often you see drivers in the interview room, the first 3, looking as though they've been given a £5 note and had a tenner taken away from them. But Alesi, absolutely overjoyed, and he's every reason to be. The Canadian Grand Prix has been won on his 31st birthday by Jean Alesi for Ferrari, with Barrichello 2nd, Irvine 3rd, Panis 4th, Schumacher 5th. Morbidelli gets that first World Championship point for the Arrows team for a very long time. To be honest, I can't remember when they last got one. But this is a rich reward for Brian Hart and his small band of engine people at Harlow in Essex. They've done a superb job. And we've got Eddie Jordan with Tony Jardine.
Eddie, it's not just an emotional day for Ferrari, but also for you, 2nd and 3rd. How are you feeling at the moment?
Well, I thought I'd always be overjoyed for Jean to win a Grand Prix, but on this occasion, I wish he'd delayed it a little bit.
Yesterday you were depressed, but today you're extremely happy, man. You've turned the whole thing around.
Well, I wouldn't say that yet. You know, we're very realistic about our performance. Still got to get through scrutineering, of course, but really the team worked well today. Both drivers acted in the way that I feel that we can do, and it's just frustrating when you know it's there but you can't really make it happen, and that's what happened on a couple of races recently. So to have both on the podium together, I suppose this is a new landmark for Jordan. We dreamed about podiums, but both on the same time, it's just amazing.
Were you worried at any stage about both of them running close together?
Did have a little quiet word with Gary and said, Gary, what's the strategy here? Are we going to say, you know, what really ought to be said? And we decided to leave it. Both drivers knew where they were on the fuel. They both drove absolutely immaculate races and exactly to orders. So we were overjoyed, I have to say.
Thank you, Eddie.
Well, it's a particularly wonderful day for Eddie Jordan, because not only did his drivers Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine finish second and third, but in a way Jean Alesi is Eddie Jordan's driver, because Jean won the European Formula 3000 Championship in 1988 as an Eddie Jordan driver. So it's a wonderful day for the Irish, it's a wonderful day for the Italians in the form of Ferrari, and it's a wonderful day for the French, of course. Peugeot second and third, Alesi's won the race.
And the drivers are in fact being waved there, in case you wonder what they're doing up on that platform. But it's wonderful to see a driver who is enjoying winning so very, very much, and also a driver who is being congratulated by so many other people around him. We can see it there, and Michael Schumacher was clearly fulsome in his praise for Alesi's efforts. And Alesi, you know, is a driver who is admired for his brio, for his pace by everyone. Everyone knows he's full of bravado, courage, but when he's not annoyed, he's an extremely nice man. And but he's also a driver who can frustrate as well, and we know that he's got a hot temper. After Imola, he was condemning of David Coulthard, but he is, after all that, a very popular driver, and it's a tremendously popular victory for him, and one that I think could well see a turning point. History tends to show that once the driver can break through and have their first Grand Prix win, and it's been such a long time coming for Alesi, that fortune can change, and it may well emerge that Alesi, really buoyed by this performance, will end up being quite a dominant Ferrari driver for the year and overshadowing Gerhard Berger.
May have come just at the right time for him if the rumours of him parting company with Ferrari at the end of the season were true. But the fact that Schumacher and Hill retired, that Schumacher only got 2 points, has closed the championship up a lot, because although Schumacher is now 7 points ahead of Damon Hill, where it might have been 15, Alesi has moved up to third position, and he's only 7 points behind Damon Hill. Gerhard Berger has gone down to fourth position in the Drivers' Championship, 7 points behind Berger. Johnny Herbert is fifth, that's Eddie Irvine running in, pursued by Barrichello. David Coulthard is sixth, but he's a long, long way behind. And in the Constructors' Championship, definitely Ferrari lead now by 3 points from Benetton, who are 6 points ahead of Williams in third position, who are 20 points ahead of Jordan, now in fourth position, thanks to their second and third places here in Montreal. That, of course, is Jean Alesi's Ferrari, and I wonder whether he did run out of fuel, or whether the fact that he took the steering wheel off will have affected him.
Well, I think the fact that we saw Gerhard Berger run out of fuel in that first half of the race is clear indication that Ferrari the Ferrari was using more fuel than the engineers expected, and one could expect that to be the case, I think, for Alesi too in the second half, and which, if that is the case, indeed, it'll mean that his win was all the more potentially fragile because of that. But I hope that, moving on to Damon Hill, that whilst he's clearly a tremendously competitive driver, and that he's going to be very annoyed about the reliability problems that he's had with his Williams car, I hope that he manages to keep his temper under control, because there are an awful lot of people working very hard at Didcot. It's a great drive for him to have nevertheless, and it's important that he doesn't create any kind of rift and resentment there. I'm sure that they'll all appreciate that his emotions are what's carrying his frustration through, and that they'll be as eager to get the performance as he is.
Just listen to the crowd. You'd think it was Italy and not Canada. That shows you how popular Alesi is. That shows you how popular a Ferrari win is, because with no disrespect to two very fine teams, in Benetton and Williams. It's refreshing to see another one right up at the front there, and Ferrari's prophecy that we're going to win in Canada has turned out to be right, fortuitously maybe, but the fact is that they did so. Jean Alain on the left, Rubens Barrichello, the protege of Ayrton Senna, who goes back to Brazil every so often and was getting pretty downcast, but how happy he is, and not half as happy as Jean Alain. Lovely man. Now let's see if we can see Eddie Irvine on the right. First time on the podium.
And now for the winning constructor.
Joy abounds in Montreal. It's going to be a very happy crowd that goes home. So the French national anthem for Jean Alain, the driver, the winner. The Italian national anthem for Ferrari, the winning constructor. Both richly deserved. 10 points for Jean Alain, 10 points for Ferrari.
And it's particularly thrilling for me to see Jean Alain there win his first Grand Prix, because he came into Formula One in 1989, the race after this, the French Grand Prix. This was the last race I did with Michele Alboreto as a teammate, and then Michele Alboreto left. Jean Alain came to join the Tyrrell team in 1989 as my teammate for the French Grand Prix in the following race, and was immediately stunning in his form, and he was a great teammate. He ended up being quicker than me, and I'm thrilled to see that potential be finally realised with his magnificent performance here today.
On the left of your picture, the man who in many ways is responsible for it, little Jean Todt, the Frenchman who left Peugeot because they wouldn't go into Formula One with a complete car as opposed to an engine, joined the Ferrari and pulled the team together in a situation where it was individual elements tending to pull in different directions, and Jean Todt has inspired them with the right sort of discipline, the right sort of management and administrative procedures, and there's never been any doubt about the skills at Ferrari. It was just a case of marshalling them properly. That he has done. So the Canadian Grand Prix finishes on a more than exciting and different note. Victory for Jean Alain and Ferrari. Second place for Rubens Barrichello and Jordan. Third place for Eddie Irvine and Jordan.
Well done, Jean Alain, a great moment for him.
And that's the Canadian Grand Prix, at long last, Alain. But certainly the early race domination of Michael Schumacher still looks rather ominous. France is next, and then a month from today, let's hope the British Grand Prix at Silverstone will give extra inspiration to Damon Hill. But Jean Alain, the winner in Canada. Just time left in this specially extended edition of Sunday Grandstand to have a quick look at some of the other sports news around today. At Wembley, the Umbro Cup has been won by Brazil, 3-1 winners against England. Brazil finished the competition as the only one of the four sides with a 100% record. Graham Lasso was the England scorer. Highlights later on BBC One, when you'll also see the goals from the Republic of Ireland's surprise 3-1 home defeat by Austria in European Championship Group 6, a defeat that puts their qualification in some doubt. Action in international match of the day, 11:05 BBC One, when Pelé will be the studio guest. Rob Andrew, again the England hero today, kicking an injury-time drop goal to give England victory over the world champions Australia in the World Cup quarter-finals. In next weekend's semis, England will play New Zealand, who are 48-30 victors over Scotland this afternoon. Frustration for England's cricketers, though. At Headingley today, West Indies won the first Cornhill Test by a very comfortable 9 wickets. Well, that's it. Hopefully, over the course of the last, 9 hours, we've learned a couple of things. The West Indies, they're going to take a great deal of beating during the course of this summer. And also, as long as he keeps going, so too will Michael Schumacher. But Jean Alesi is a triumphant winner of the Canadian Grand Prix. Bye-bye.
On Tuesday night at 9:35, a new series on BBC Radio 5 Live looks back at the best of British racing drivers, from Moss to Mansell.
Eyes down. Mid-evening cricket. Highlights of the match between Worcestershire and Lancashire. Tuesday at 8 on BBC Two.
Leslie's a civil servant.
What are you doing?
With one thing on his mind. And when he meets Julia, a porn writer, he thinks he might be up for it.
Leslie, please.
But not everything goes to plan.
Half an hour.
Their first date.
I'll just have to take off yours then, won't I? You're a big man, aren't you? Kind of like my stepdad. If you could see me now. Gentleman paying a pretty penny for what he got free. I'd be the one in charge now. You'd have to do just what I say.
What would you do?
I'd make him kiss my bloody foot. No, my ass. And then I'd give him marks. Yeah.
How would you do that?
Any way I could.
But you couldn't punish him if he was stronger than you, so he wouldn't let you. You'd have to make sure that you were stronger than he was. Hmm?
Hello.
Susanna.